Everybody for the Thursday night Keystone Big Book Workshop. I am Rob K., a recovered alcoholic. This workshop is facilitated by Tony.R and KDJ. We will keep everybody muted during the workshop except for the facilitators. Please note that we'll be taking questions after the meeting, so please write them down so you don't forget them. Any inappropriate conduct will not be tolerated, and you'll be removed by one of the co-hosts. Have a great meeting. How we open this meeting is with the third step prayer, which is on page 63 of your big book. God, I offer myself to thee, to build with me and do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. I do thy will always. Tony, it's all yours, my friend.
Right now, thank you. I'm a recovered alcoholic. My name's Tony. Sobriety date's April 8, 1989. I'd like to welcome everybody. Those that are new, those who have been following along for a while, and those just here for the entertainment. We're going to have a little bit of something for everybody tonight. If you've been around a while, probably a lot of the stuff we do here probably going to disturb you because we go right out of the book, right? That's the last we go right back to the book. And a lot of stuff we hear in the fellowship, really we kind of dispel the myth or the depth and weight of it, right? So tonight we're going to look at a couple of things that I hear a lot of misunderstanding around, and from here forward, we're just going to use the book, so it's quite interesting. So it'd be helpful if you have one. Everybody got a book, piece of paper, and a pen. If you have some questions, you can write it down later. If you kind of get disturbed by something that you think I'm saying that's coming from the book, you can write it down. We could revisit later. Keep an open mind. A lot of people, what we tend to do is we hear something we disagree with, then we start formulating an argument within our own minds. Anybody here? And we stop participating. We start arguing with ourselves and think we're arguing with the person on the screen. We can't hear you, so it's a one-sided argument, right? And then we leave the group thinking those people got a problem. And then you think about us all week, right? Because part of our aim is and good sponsorship and good study is to disturb us a bit. But the question of alcoholism and the profound knowledge we've acquired by sitting in meetings. So, these things, right? Because I know I was pretty disturbed, not only before going through this, but during going through this and afterwards. So I've studied this process quite a bit. So one of the things that we're looking at, we just finished looking at 6 and 7. We looked at 8, but I want to kind of touch base on something here. The earnestness that we're going to look at page 75 for a second. And the reason a lot of people, the message in AA starts to, is not really, I'm trying to be nicer as I move along here. It's not serving me well. I really stumble.
It's so boring.
Yeah, why start now, right? So the diminished message that a lot of us hear who have been through this, because you don't know until you've been through this, right? So once you've been through this, you look back and go, holy shit, what's the shit people have been telling me all these years, right? Because you just don't know. And you know what? They don't know either, because the basis of the foundation that they're going through is usually hearsay or based on other people's ideas or other books or other methods and stuff like that. And very few sponsorship, which is the base of this thing, is taken through the process in the book. Right? And so whose process is it that we're looking at? We're looking at their process that they put together as a formula that they've just not discovered, but somebody carried to them as a means of recovery. Right? They recovered from an illness that was kicking their ass. And what happened is they were able to live a life beyond anything they could ever imagine. So in 75 here, a lot of people admit they have a problem, but a lot of people haven't done step 1. How many people realize it's 2 different things?
Yep.
Right? And you wouldn't know that unless you went through the book, right? Because a lot of people do step 1 and they get the pink cloud and everything's fantastic and everything's great and people like them and they're liking them. They're showering more often and, wow, let me tell you how fantastic my life is. The promises are coming true. Well, what did you do? I just went to meetings and stopped drinking. Of course, your life's going to improve for a little bit, right? Then the phone starts ringing. It's creditors. People start reminding you of the past. You're worried about who's going to know the things in the future. Your job's maybe not as secure as you wish. You're still being held accountable for things you said and done. Nobody like that in this group, right? And then we start getting pissed off because now we're 3 weeks sober and we should be putting it on a resume and we should be getting our dues now, right? Anybody like that here? Right? And these people are skeptic at the idea that I'm going to stay sober, right? And so we ride this pink cloud out, and then reality sets in, and there's no basis for our recovery other than self. I don't know if anybody's ever been there, and then we find ourselves with a drink in hand again. Baffled how that happened. But we know how that happened because we've been through the process in the book, right? So the highlight, I guess I kind of fibbed for a second, is real fast. We're going to kind of go to we agnostics just so we can build up where we're at. And so we see on page 44, in the preceding chapters, we've learned something of alcoholism. So the rest of the book is dedicated to not only the process, but it starts talking about the human dilemma or the human condition. Anybody realize that? They stopped talking about alcoholism now, like the symptoms of alcoholism, but they do make reference to what we're dealing with as we go along, meaning, hey, you're not out of the woods yet. Remember, we deal with alcohol, cunning, baffling, and powerful. Remember, you can't really depend on you to monitor yourself whether you have this thing or not, because this is one of those things that's kind of weird, is you couldn't really monitor when you were going to get loaded, right? It just seemed to happen, and we were baffled. So how do you know when you have this thing? Well, it talks about a demonstration of these things, right? And when you seem to have these things taking place of the depth and weight that they talked about in the doctor's opinion, we seem to be able to do things on a more of an ease than we were before, right? We seem to be governed by a new set of principles. We seem to be governed by new power, right? Because what was our problem? Lack of power. You notice it didn't say lack of thinking, right? Because we're thinkers. Any thinkers in the room? And so we've been given a formula. So as we went through, like we agnostics, they talked about what the main purpose of this book was to enable us to find this power that they experienced. And they talked in their experience where this was found was deep down within. How many people found that surprising news? How many people have been to meetings for years and never heard that? Yep. Everybody make your Santa Claus list. Make your understanding. Do it the way you want. Nowhere in here does it say that. It says you can choose your own conception once we explain it to you. So your conception is still along the basis of our understanding, because it's a collective understanding what this power is. Right? It's a source that we get to tap into that creates this psychic change of spiritual experience. Yes, no, maybe. Are we all on the same page here? And so we see, regardless whether I call it a Samsung or iPhone, the basis of it, all these phones are the same. Yes, no matter where you are, no matter what country you go, you fundamentally know how to operate this phone or cell phone, right? And that's kind of like what they mean by this power. It's a universal understanding. It's all inclusive, not exclusive, and it's in every man, woman, and child. Right, this light, this thing deep down, and it's always been there. And what they helped us do was clear the ground a bit. So as we went through this, and this was where the transformation starts to happen, we found out for the first time that step 3 was an idea. And what was the idea? That I could have this experience if I was willing to go through the process that they went through. How many people found that kind of interesting? Because a lot of us get taught step 3 is this huge transformation that happens, that once I turn my will and life over to God, like we're capable of it in step 3. We're not really capable of that. That's why it's an idea that we need to follow through on, because if we were able to do that in 3, we understand now we wouldn't need to do anything else, would we? Right? So if I was able to do that, then my life should be pretty good after doing step 3. But there's a problem with doing step 3. We're still stuck on self. Nobody in this fine group I know. But, we're not much, but we're all we think about, right? Anybody? So, right? So we see the that in order for me to be free of this illness that's kicking my ass, because it has me, I don't have it, right? We see I need to undergo this change, the same change that they went through and they explained, right? And through this course of action that was available to me. So step 3 was a decision to carry on with the rest of this course of action to bring about the change as they discussed in step 2 as the solution to step 1, right? So we see step 2 as a course of action that they engaged in and enabled them to recover from alcoholism that they put in the basic text. Are we all good on that?
Yep.
So how well you understand that will determine how true to the road you stay. I don't know how else to say that, because we have 2 alternatives, and the alternative is we don't have 2 choices. People think it's a choice. It's not a choice. It's an alternative. What's an alternative? Well, I'm already suffering back before I went through this process. I'm already suffering from alcoholism, and I can't change or curb my life. I seem to fall victim to the insanity that precedes the first drink continuously. That's the unmanageability. I can't keep myself sober, no matter how great the necessity or the wish. Anybody like that in this group? Everybody's staying sober under any and all conditions, and they don't drink no matter what. And I seem to be drinking no matter what the condition, and I can't stay sober, right? So my problem precedes the first drink, not after. I'm different than a lot of people in the fellowship. My problem is before I drink, stone cold sober, that I have this phenomenon, this malady that centers in the mind that I can't change, alter, see, or feel as it's happening. It parallels with my sound thinking. There's a switch that happens, and I can't see the danger when I'm about to. That's why the insanity, they call this thing, a phenomena also that happens in our brain. But the solution that's available to us. So we see as we start the 4th step, the purpose of the 4th step is a couple things. 1 is to learn a recipe. 2 is to remove the blocks that stand in between me and what? This power, right? So the first part of the inventory is the resentments. Learn how to master resentments and to bring about a different experience and not be poisoned by the things that I'm carrying. How many people find that pretty cool when they went through the process? I started to get relief from the bondage itself and the difficulties within me that created these stumbling blocks. I started getting some freedom from that, and it was kind of like, wow, absent of a drink, which is pretty cool for us because a lot of us look for freedom from these things in all different shape, forms, and experience. Anybody? That's why there's so many different 12-step fellowships, because people have found different forms of escape in a lot of different areas: gambling, sex, eating, on and on and on. A lot of us could check off those check marks, right? But for us, the alcoholism is something beyond us, right? So when we went through this, we seen, and then it was to outgrow fear, right? So when we started getting this recipe, it was pretty cool that they were giving us a formula of assessment. So it's based on the serenity prayer kind of, right? God grant me the serenity. So I need to be able to experience some form of peace in order to assess. Anybody? Because when you're disturbed, how well are you able to assess? You're not able to assess. What it is fight or flight and punish. Nobody in this fine group, right? So the ability to pause, right? God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, to assess courage to change the things I can, and the power to, right? Anybody? So we see that when we get to the fear part, the essence of that prayer is starting to happen in our lives. And then we get into the conduct and formulating the relationships with this. The forms of meditation has started as going through this book. And by the time we get to page 71, by doing their process and applying their prayers and going through this inventory thing, we see that there's more to this than writing out your life story. We see there's more to this than just a list of all the nasty things. What it is really it's a combination lock to seeing what self looks like on a non-spiritual basis. Right? Yes?
Yeah.
What it is, what my 4th step is not how I used to be, it's how I am. On my best efforts to live on self-will. Yay, right? And it's a painful event, isn't it? Anybody? How many people finish their 4 here and go, wow, that was a great exercise in self. Can't wait to do all that again, right? It's kind of like, it's a big shit pile. Now we're looking for the pony, right? That's the only thing good about a farm. When you go to a farm, you see a big pile of shit. What we've learned through the steps is there's got to be a pony around here somewhere. It's the shifting of our thinking. And then get away from downwind, right? So on page 71 here, we hope those that put this together and you as the participant, what do they hope on page 71?
Okay, my name is Katie. I'm an alcoholic. Page 71. We hope you are convinced now that God can remove whatever self-will has blocked you off from him.
Now, you're already experiencing this. You're starting to experience this freedom that's available to us. It's not later. It's now. So how willing you are to do this will determine the relief that you start to experience from self. That's pretty cool. How many people has experienced that through this process as laid out in our literature?
Yep.
Pretty cool, right? So, Go ahead.
If you have already made a decision and an inventory of your gross handicaps, you have made a good beginning.
And what
that being so...
Yeah, so hold it. So what are our grosser handicaps?
Resentments, fears, harms.
Right? Resentment, fears, and harms. We see how these things are blocking us off from source. How these things are poisoning us. A lot of people shift this and says, oh, the selfishness, inconsideration, dishonesty. That's going to be something that you're going to fluctuate in and out of the rest of your life. That's not the things that are causing you all your problems. How do we know that? Because we've seen based on self, my instincts, self-esteem, security, all these things I made decisions on to create security by trying self-preservation to cause me all my problems. The vehicle was selfish, inconsiderate, and dishonesty, but that wasn't what was driving me. Pretty cool, right? So the focus still is on these things. What things? Resentment, fears, and harms. These things that block me off. Because we've seen that did not these emotions, right, make us ill, right? Did not these feelings, after all, determine the existence of our lives? We've seen that on what page? Page 54, and also going through the inventory process, right? They talk about that, right? These feelings, right? These things that are poisoning us. So we went through, we found out the purpose of the 5th step, right, is to try to remove these blocks, to have a new relationship and a new experience with what? Our Creator. That we have the same experience as those had to put this together. Pretty cool, right? Now, here how we know we've done a good step. 1 is this thing on page 75, that a lot of people don't have this earnestness when they do step 1. They think it's about, I don't want to drink again. Then you really haven't done step 1, right? Because the basis of step 1 is here in the second paragraph. First paragraph. When?
Page 75. When we decide who is to hear our story, we waste no time. We have written inventory and we are prepared for a long talk. We explain to our partner what we're about to do and why we have to do it.
Right? That we're alcoholic, we're looking for this spiritual experience. Unless I have this psychic change, right? Then I'm going to die an alcoholic death. So, right? And so then they reiterate the importance of this thing that we're still being governed by, right? And what's that? We're still afflicted with this illness, right? Because we don't know exactly when, but somewhere along the line, this shift will happen. We'll be the last ones to really know when it happens because we're really self-deluded a lot of times. How many people here say, oh yeah, I've had this change, life's fantastic, and then got another 24-hour chip, right? So we've seen the one guy, right, here's a little bit irritable, restless, and discontent as an example. He drank again. So we said, oh, that's it. You got to watch out for a problem. Then they say, yeah, we know you'd think that way. This other guy didn't have a care in the world. Mm-hmm. And he drank again. So it's something beyond our ability to see, feel, and touch. It lies dormant. It's stealth within inside of us. And when this thing arises, we're drinking again. And then after we go, what the hell am I doing? How many people said that after they drank here? I'm not supposed to be drinking. I can't believe I've done this. Okay, so there we go. So here we go. Go ahead.
He should realize that we are engaged upon a life and death errand.
When does that change? That we're engaged upon a life and death errand. Notice it didn't say, oh, we're trying to get sober and recreate our lives so we could experience the promises, burn some incense in the morning, and take up yoga as a way of life. We're on a life and death errand. Yeah. When does that change? Well, once I experience a psychic change or spiritual experience and I have a daily reprieve. I'm still under the umbrella of this death sentence. Right? I'm on a life and death errand. I need to be motivated still. You see, the language what's motivating me is how well I did step one and knowing what I'm up against, what I'm conceding to. So it's a lot different than admitting I have a problem. I'm conceding to it and realize I'm under its grips. And I know what my fate is unless this change happens. How many people remember that stage? Remember the guy, Fred? Remember he thought he had it going on, that he could quit on his own resources? That relapse was unthinkable? How many people were like that here? Mm-hmm. Relapse is unthinkable. Then alcoholism got his attention again. And then he went, uh-oh. And then some members rebooked him. I don't know how else to say that, right? Reintroduced him to what step one is. And then he kind of got a whole new understanding what he was up against and got motivated through this thing. This is that part of that motivation we learned in step one. Yeah. You'll see where I'm going with this in a minute, right? So as we go along, then we did 6 and 7. We did that last week in great detail. How many people found it interesting the way the book lays it out compared to how you think it used to be?
Yeah.
So we see nowhere in there does it tell you to work on yourself, does it? And we see there that you really can't trust, right, what idea is good or bad, right? Because we've seen that in our 4. Right? How many people that I was just trying to be nice, and then you punish them for not getting what you wanted out of it, right? So, all the women said, amen. No, I'm just joking. Last week I was beating up the guys. This week is the women. Okay, so we see that we reconfirm step 3 on page 76. Really what we're doing is I'm going to trust God, right? And we see how step 6 goes into 7, and then when we're completed. And so the things that we're still hanging on to, we pray for willingness. And what's that? We're praying for willingness to let these things go that I use as to recreate or to, as I use to justify who I am in my story. Because a lot of us like our story, don't we? I'm not ready to give up my story, because if I give up my story, that means I got to stop making excuses for where I am and what I'm doing. Right? That means I like my story because I could be victimized by it, and you could feel sorry for me, and I could feel sorry for me, and I don't have to change. Because if you had my life, that's what they're talking about, these things we still hang on to that determine our story. Then we realize we're determining our story by hanging on to it. They're not just, those things in the past are no longer determining my story. I am. Ooh, I hated that part, right? Did not we permit these? Because now we have a way out.
Yeah.
Right? So if we still cling to some of these things, we pray for willingness. So then we get into where they said, we'll go here. Go ahead.
Middle of the page. Now we need more action. Without which we find that faith without works is dead. Let's look at steps 8 and 9.
So if we're going to look at 8 and 9, that means I need to go through my list that I've acquired in my 4, right? Remember that list? The resentments, the harms, right? The conduct, and then the list of people that weren't on the first couple lists. I have a list of all these people now. And when I did my 5th, I put a couple more stars besides some of these people that I didn't thought I owed a men to, that I realize now I do owe a men to. How many people had that experience as they went through their 5th and realized, holy shit, I owe some of these people an amend?
Yeah.
Right? And which is really cool, because some of those people you wouldn't have walked across the street to piss on them to put them out if they were on fire. Now you're willing to do that, right? Okay, I'll walk across the street to do that. That's willingness. That's growth, right? So that's the way the guy sponsored me. So anyways, that was a long time ago. They don't talk like that anymore, but it made sense to me, right? because some of those people on my resentment list, I was still hanging on to some of that stuff, right? Anybody? So my sponsors knew how twisted I was way back then. I know it's hard to believe now, but way back then when I was going through, they said, Tony, if they're around fire on the other side of the street, would you be willing to walk across the street to piss on them, to put them out? And I said, no. Then pray for the willingness, Tony. Okay, I can do that. And I remember I was so happy once I went to my sponsor. You know what? I'm willing to walk across the street with this person and piss on them to put them out of there. My sponsor said, good job. Let's move on, Tony. So give you a rough idea of that. Like, unemployable, puking green bile, dying of alcoholism at 27 years old, and I still thought I was a vision for you, right? I was like, what? Nuts. But I didn't know it. Looking back, I kind of, oh my God, I give my sponsor a virtual hug every time I think of what he had to deal with, right? Like, anyhow, moving on. We're getting into this point here. Okay, go ahead.
Let's look at steps 8 and 9. We have a list of all persons we have harmed and to whom we are willing to make amends.
And that would be people, places, and things on that, right? Because these people, places, and things are a part of that, right? Isn't it? We have that list. Okay, go ahead.
We subjected ourselves to a drastic self-appraisal.
Really, eh? Drastic. It was drastic, right? How many people were breaking a sweat when they went to do their fifth? If you're going in there feeling good, you're not doing your fifth. Right? If you're going in there, I'm here to talk about me, though that's a meeting. That isn't a fifth step. If you're going in there and you're feeling that knot in your stomach, how many people? Right? And you're kind of in your brain, and you're, and you got to pray your ass off to go do this thing. That's a fifth step. Is the shifting of the introduction to the demonstration of humility. Pretty well. When we read what those things are on that page, there's the essence, losing fear. It's a big step doing your 5, eh? Honestly. Yeah. It's not a big deal when you're bullshitting all the way through it, is it? Celebrated by another 24-hour chip. So we see how we create our own demises by skimping on the information that's being provided, really. Right? So if they say, rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. And I noticed that me, and including everybody I've seen go through this, who've done this straight up, who've done it and maintained it, has never relapsed. I've been in AA coming up to 44 years, and I'm sober coming up to 33 years. So in the last almost 33 years, I've never met anybody who's ever done this, the way it's outlined in the book, who's had this experience and maintained it, right? Who's ever relapsed. That's strong language, but I've never met one person. Okay, go ahead.
Now we go out to our fellows and repair the damage done in the past. We attempt to sweep away the debris which is accumulated out of our effort to live on self-will and run the show ourselves.
So there's debris there. What debris are they? Sometimes it'll be financial, it'll be emotional. We see there's still a lot of damage, isn't there? But in a lot of this stuff, we've found peace with it, or a new version of the story. You have a new way of looking at something that we're unable to see it from that perspective before. So now we have a new way of looking at it, and we also we're looking through a spiritual lens now. Right? Because we're not alone in this assessment. We're applying prayer and meditation and shifting these emotional booby traps or these emotional hostage taking within inside of ourselves, right? So when the old story wants to come up, we pause, pray, and remind ourselves of the new story. So what's really cool here is my sponsor taught me, a lot of people say, oh, step 9's about you. How many people heard that? It stopped being about you the moment you did step 3. Right? The pursuit of you is what got you here. Right? We have all had enough of you, including you, right? Enough. Okay? So they're saying we need to keep a new focus. So what they're saying here is there's people around us that needs to experience some healing, some freedom, and some happiness. right? Because there's debris there. So when we think of them now, most of them, we have a new idea about them, do we not? We have a new understanding. We have a new, even a kind and considerate view of them. Even though they cause us problems, we look at them differently. We see them as sick people. Based on their instincts, they've done certain things like I've done certain things, and I was collateral damage as other people were collateral damage. So I have a new way of looking at them. Pretty cool, right? Okay, go ahead.
Sure. If we haven't the will to do this, we ask until it comes.
So there again, we ask till it comes. So we're in prayer, are we not?
Yep.
So there's a lot of asking happening here. Anybody notice that? So we're going to do something really, you got to really keep an open mind with me, right? Especially if you've been around a little bit and you've been to more than 10 meetings and you already know everything. So you really got to keep an open mind here, because what they teach from treatment centers, from people who done other methods, and is different than what the book's saying. So we're going to do something really kind of interesting here, and just take the next week to read it for yourself and look at it, right? So they've mentioned prayer a couple times here, right? So the way the book was designed was you were to read it before you started this process. How many people find that interesting? Your sponsor's job was to get you to read this and then ask you if you wanted to go through with it. So you already had an indication what was in here and what was being asked, right? Mm-hmm. So as we go through this prayer thing starts happening. So remember, it was agreed upon the beginning we would go to any lengths for victory over alcohol. Any lengths, where are they talking about? Any lengths where? Within. Because these are the blocks that block us off from source, from power, from God, whatever your terminology, creative intelligence, right? Regardless, from the power necessary to overcome self and have a different experience. These are those Klingons to my spirit that are still attached, that are poisoning me and determining, right? What it's trying to do is talk me out of happiness. Anybody here? How many people talk themselves out of happiness here? Well, let me go back to a real reliable source. Self, what do you think? Glad you asked. Right? So it's kind of like we stop listening to everybody. What I love about sponsorship is that we get all the advice we want from them and go, yeah, and still do what the hell we want anyways, right?
Who does that?
Nobody I know. Okay, so squiggly writing. Okay, so go ahead.
Remember, it was agreed at the beginning we would go to any lengths for victory over alcohol. Probably there are still some misgivings. As we look over the list of business acquaintances and friends we have hurt, we may have felt diffident about going to some of them on a spiritual basis.
Okay, ready? How many people got a pen and highlighter? As we look over, underline that. As we look over, what are you doing? Are you running out and making amends? No, as you look over, there's a preparation to this thing. As we look over this thing, this list, as we look over these things, right? So my sponsor, and it helped me, but it just made me feel better, was to make 3 lists of the list that now that I'm willing to make now, the maybes and the nevers. Right? And then if you don't need that list because you're totally willing, then you just make 2 lists. The emotional and then the financial. There's 2 categories. Emotional, some form of emotional attachment, or financial. Right? And then you can split that up into now, maybe, and nevers. How many people like that?
Yeah.
Right? You'll find it funny later. I'm going to ruin the surprise, but you'll find it. I'll give you a bit of my. You'll find it funny later that we do that. Now I get to negotiate now, maybe and never. Right? Like, isn't that a big? How many people like that idea? It's self again, isn't it? Self says, okay, let's renegotiate spiritual terms here. Okay. We went from willing to go to any lengths to, okay, I could do this list about my assessment and what I think is important. So self is just taken over there, right? When really we should be praying for guidance in each situation and intuitiveness, and we'll get to that in a second. Go ahead.
Let us be reassured, to some people we need not and probably should not emphasize the spiritual feature on our first approach.
How many people has done that here? Before doing the steps, you're out making amends, talking about how spiritual a giant you are now, and you're there to make them accountable for the things they've done to you. Mom, I'd like to talk to you now. I'm here to make amends, but mostly for the shit you've done to me, and I want to tell you how much I forgive you. Oh, you don't remember everything? Good, I made a list. Let's go over it again. Man, I feel better. Why aren't you talking to me, Mom? What's the matter? Right? How many people have done that amends in the past?
Yeah.
Self goes, great opportunity to remind them what an asshole they were so I can feel better about myself and tell them I forgive them. That's not an amend. We've done it, though. Anybody ever done it? I just want to tell you I forgive you for such an asshole you've been. And let me point out in how many ways I've thought it, and I forgive you.
But let's talk about it one more time.
Yeah. Nothing like making amends for an amend, right?
Oh, yeah.
Or people, hey, I know a couple exes I'd like to call, make amends, over a candlelight dinner, right? Or a couple employers that maybe go start with them, make amends to them and how much I've changed. Or some people I could borrow money from once they see. Anybody kind of make those amends with a... Yeah, it's funny. So they're saying, let's not go out unsupervised here. Relax, let's look at it. Okay, go ahead.
At the moment, we are trying to put our lives in order, but this is not an end in itself. Our real purpose is to fit ourselves to be of maximum service to God and the people about us.
Damn, you don't hear that shit talked about in meetings around step 8 and 9, do you? What you hear is people who are unguided or not strong sponsorship or not using the book and reading what the book says it's about me still. Here, it's saying, what is it about? It's about what? Our real purpose is to fit ourselves. You hear people say, oh, our real purpose is to be maximum service to God and the people around us. They take out a word because it's inconvenient. I don't like that word. It doesn't fit with my recovery. Right? What's the word? Fit, purpose, get busy. But it's football tonight. But it's your home group. But I want to sit and play video games. There's new people at that meeting. What you've just said is this change really hasn't happened yet. Or self is too big of a presence still for you to make a difference in somebody else's life. This is, where are you on that list? Third, which will really be first later. You may seem third, but you'll really be first. You know how it doesn't say sobriety? How many people, sobriety is my number one priority, comes before everything. How many people has heard that? Well, do the steps. How about doing the steps? Right? Because in the beginning, because you're trying to get sober, you're on a life and death errand, but your real purpose is to be a maximum service to who? To God and the people around us, to fit ourselves. That means I need to meet my responsibilities in my home, with my kids, with my employer, and all this other. I need to be accountable in these areas and not slough it off as another form of self taking over to disguise, causing me and people around me problems. Because it takes a lot of work to be responsible. How many people, right? Well, you know what? I'd rather go to a meeting and roundup than to have my kids this weekend. Right? I'd rather go buy that new car than to pay my child support. I'd rather, come on, I'm not alone in that same back and forth. I'd rather buy a new dress, not me, but you know what I'm saying, right? Then lunch meat and all. We do that, right? It's still self. So that sounded kind of weird. I'd rather buy a new dress. Anyways, I was trying to not leave anybody.
You're speaking for a friend.
Oh, yeah, I already took care of that in the 5th. Sorry. So, and the people about us. So underline that, right? And listen to that as we go along to fit ourselves. So here, we're going to do this exercise here. So now we're reading along, and it'll give us different scenarios. So we go on page 78, right? So page 77, it starts the introduction to different scenarios. 78, 79, 80, 81. And whose experience? They're talking about their experience. And you notice there's prayer and counsel all the way through that. How many people notice that? I have read through this before. Right? So there's pausing, prayer, and guidance and stuff. So they're saying, I'm not rushing out and doing my 9. You hear people say this, I can't do 10 and 11 or 12 till I finish my 9. You ever hear that? How many people's heard that? Are you on step 11? No, I haven't finished 9. Where do you get that idea from? Because if your life is dependent on your relationship with something greater than you in order to do these things, because self wasn't able to do these things before, to face these people, to face these things, to overcome self, so I could have some humility as I go visit these people, places, and things, to remove the debris, right? Then I'm in trouble. If it's still self-directing the show, it's not going to go well, is it? There's a key element missing. What element did I come to a realization is that I need as an ally in my life? I seen the benefit of this relationship. I made the decision to unify my life with this force, life force. This life force doesn't punish me. I'm punishing me. I need freedom for myself. And all these people said they've experienced something different by doing this. So that's why it says we thought well before taking this step, making sure we were ready. What ready? Step 3, that we could at least abandon ourselves utterly to this way of life. That's why it says we thought well. I know what I'm doing. I'm enlisting. I'm not being drafted. Big difference, right? I see the benefit of this relationship. Like, it's not a shotgun marriage, right? I see it. I went through the fundamentals of dating 1, 2, and 3, right? Anything could happen at any time, even though I was hopeful, but yet there's no change. You know what I mean? I think it's going great. You get the phone call, this isn't working out, all right? I'm drinking again. That's 1, 2, and 3. So if you're doing 1, 2, and 3 every day, well, that's your experience, right? Just nothing really changing, but you're always hopeful, right? So 4 to 7 is the engagement. I'm serious now. I'm serious, right? The engagement. 9 to 12 is the marriage. It's got to be a way of life. I need to clear up all this stuff so I could have a good marriage. For those that are married, the ideal way is to clean up your single life so it doesn't interfere with your married life. Does that kind of make sense? So that's what 8 and 9 are, is to clear up your single life so your new life doesn't get interfered with. There will be nothing from your past to come up and cripple your relationship. With what? With Source. So, as we go through this, let's look at 83. So, look at the wording here, how they're talking, right? The spiritual life. Oh, here, let's back up. So, let's start. So, we clean house with the family. Everybody see that? It's just down a little farther.
Bottom of the first paragraph. So we clean house with the family, asking each morning in meditation that our Creator show us the way of patience, tolerance, kindliness, and love.
What step is that?
Step 11.
Step 11. Why are they talking about it here? Why are they talking about it in 9? Why are they talking about praying and asking all the way through this thing? Why did they say we pray for the willingness till it comes?
Just looking.
So that means they're preparing me for a process that precedes my step 9s. And what's that? Well, my relationship. So step 9 is where I get to see my Creator or God's fingerprints on my life, right? Because it talked about their experience on 63 was He provided all that we needed if we kept close to Him and performed His work well. Established on such a footing, we became less and less interested in ourselves, our plans. More and more, we became interested in seeing what we could contribute to life. I'm just kind of paraphrasing there, right? As we felt new power flow in, as we enjoyed peace of mind, right? Pretty wild stuff, right? So we see, in order to have that experience, go ahead.
The spiritual life is not a theory. We have to live it.
Oh, shit, that's a problem. I'd rather just talk about it. Can I go to a meeting and talk about the spiritual life, and then when I get home, I'll tell everybody where to go and how to get there? You know what I mean? When I put the key in the door, there's still an air of anxiety. People are still kind of nervous when I show up. Maybe you're different. Your story's different. People aren't still answering the phone on the first 3 rings. A lot of it's still going to voicemail. That actually changes the more sober you get, right? The more they realize, the long pause. Anybody still have that? You phone people and they pause to see what condition you're in. Okay. Living it.
Unless one's family expresses a desire to live upon spiritual principles, we think we ought not urge them.
That means shut up about it. Quit talking about what a spiritual giant you are all of a sudden and everybody around you is wrong. We like to do that, don't we? Look, yeah. I'm spiritual now, and you poor people, all you poor people around me, I'm glad I've enlightened now to come here and help you. Really? Come on, we've all done it, have we not? Come on, eh? Well, the cloak of pride. They're there. I'll pray for you. Yeah, I love these people. They're there. I'll pray for you. Keep coming back. Put my hands around your neck. Okay, sorry. Make amends later. Okay, go ahead.
They will change in time. Our behavior will convince them more than our words.
Really, right? Rather see a sermon than hear one.
Yeah.
That's what my sponsor used to say. If people couldn't hear you, would they be able to see what you're talking about? They used to have a saying, sometimes you'll be the only big book somebody will see. Oh boy, that's a little different, right? Okay.
Our behavior will convince them more than our words. We must remember that 10 or 20 years of drunkenness would make a skeptic out of anyone.
Right? Underline that.
Yep.
Put it so every time you feel yourself indignant and going to complain, go back and read that. Be grateful they're even talking to you still.
It's true.
Or even willing to talk to you. Even taking your calls for some of us, right? Anybody?
Yeah.
Okay, so as we read, so here we go. We read this at every meeting and people really misunderstand it. Okay, go ahead. If we're going to do the promise. How many people like the promises? Oh, they're coming true. Oh, what did you do? Nothing, but they're coming true. I've been to 5 meetings this week. I think the second one's coming true. By next week, I'll be amazed before I'm halfway through. Right? Go ahead.
Bottom paragraph. If we are painstaking about this phase in our development.
Phase of our development. What phase of our development? Underline. Phase of our development. It's a process. Which goes with, we're going to read it, but we've already read it in the spiritual appendix. In the back, what usually takes place in a few months could seldom have been brought about by years of self-discipline, something like that, right? But usually takes place in a few months. So they're giving this indication of something taking place within a few months. The site could change the spiritual experience, somewhere on the educational variety, somewhere on the sudden. But even on the sudden, you need to find a way to maintain, develop it, right? This phase of our development. And what are we looking to do? Well, we'll go on to say that. Go ahead.
We are going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. We will not regret the past nor wish to shut the door on it. We will comprehend the word serenity and we will know peace.
So we'll comprehend, we're going to. Notice it didn't say now you're experiencing these things. How many people notice that? You're going to. If, right? If you're going to, your phase of your development, you're talking to somebody who's just read through this. Have they not? Is it not the language of somebody who's just read from 6 and 7 to where we are on page 83? I'm reading through it, sitting at my desk. Nothing's really changed now, has it? So talking about their experience with this process and reiterating to you, the reader, the next phase of our development, the introduction to something. Are they not? Am I missing something here? Yes? No? How many people agree with that? Notice it didn't say, well, you've done 15 amends now. Or how are you feeling? Right? Okay, keep going.
No matter how far down the scale we have gone, we will see how our experience can benefit others. That feeling of uselessness and self-pity will disappear. We will lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in our fellows.
Will disappear, not has disappeared.
Mm-hmm.
See the language they're using? It's something that I could look forward to. Based on who? Those that went before me. They're saying, hey, relax. I know you're feeling kind of overwhelmed here, and you're looking at this stuff, and you're arguing about these amends, and self is taking over again. And yeah, we reminded you a couple times that it was agreed upon in the beginning that you'd be willing to go to any lengths to make this experience happen. But you just got stuck on self again. Relax. Right? Go ahead.
Self-seeking will slip away. Our whole attitude and outlook upon life will change. Fear of people and economic insecurity will leave us. We will intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us.
Wouldn't that be nice if it did happen by the time we got to page 84? Mm-hmm. Wouldn't that be cool?
Very cool.
That, I just overnight, yeah, wouldn't that be awesome? Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
We will intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us. We will suddenly realize that God is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves.
We're not experiencing that yet because we haven't started the amends process.
Yeah.
How many people, before they started their amends process, were arguing about some of these amends? And rationalizing, justifying, and going back to the narrator and the argument person in their brain. How many people, before you even started, how many people went right to the worst amends and you got stuck there for a while? You stopped listening.
Yep.
See how funny the brain is? Your self is still trying to talk you out of the process that you agreed to was necessary in order for the participation of you participating in the saving of your own life. Remember, we're on a life and death errand. Because if this way doesn't come about, and if I don't have this experience, what's my fate? I'm going to die an alcoholic death. I'm going to be doomed to an alcoholic death. Okay, so we're going to get into keeping an open mind here. How many people are still here? Show hands. How many people want a second to show up again? I'll give you a second. Okay, everybody back? Okay, welcome back. Okay, go ahead.
Are these extravagant promises? We think not. They're being fulfilled.
So who's confirming that? You're reading it. We said we think not. Those of us who've experienced it.
Right.
You see what it's saying? Right? Okay. We think not. They're being fulfilled among us.
Sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. They will always materialize if we work for them.
What's the work is clearing away the debris. Mm-hmm. Takes work to clear away, there's floods here. The damage of the floods, what's the first thing they need to do is remove all the debris in order to rebuild. So all that debris that we're carrying, that we're looking at, and we get a good sense of holy shit, right? We have a different view of this stuff, the damage we have caused. But it's not an exercise in beating ourselves up, it's the exercise of making right. Mm-hmm. Which is cool, right? It's not about turning on myself and self-pity. It's about the realization that, you know what, we're going to get rid of the buddy down there. So it's the realization that there's a different experience here. So they will always materialize if we work for them. So they're talking about the promises, right? And their experience. Yes, no?
Yeah.
Look at the wording here. Ready? This thought. What thought? The thought of the promises, right? Based on all the problems that we have, all the debris with people, places, and things, and business, all this shit that we've accumulated on the basis of trying to live on self-will. but now we're on a different basis, right? We're having a different experience in spite of all that stuff, which is pretty cool, right? This thought, the thought of the promises, if we're willing to work for them. Okay, go ahead.
This thought brings us to step 10, which suggests we continue to take personal inventory and continue to set right any new mistakes as we go along.
So they say continue. Continue, does that mean you've already been doing it?
Yeah.
Where do we learn how to do it? That's what the whole basis of the 4th and 5th step was. And 6 and 7, right? This thing. Yes, no?
Yeah.
Right? So follow along here, okay? Go ahead.
We vigorously commenced this way of living as we cleaned up the past.
We commenced as we cleaned up the past, right? We commenced. Does that kind of make sense? So as I'm cleaning up the past, I need to continue doing the process that I learned and went through and experienced. Yes, no?
Yeah.
Remember, we're just still reading about this. We're not doing anything yet, right? They're preparing us. Are they not? They're giving us a summary of what you're going to continue to do. It's like if you're phoning, hey, I can't find your address. Oh, well, where are you? Oh, you're on Highway 10? Keep going. Continue. Right? And watch out for the speed limit. Watch out for the animal. Watch out for all. Continue to watch for all this, but continue. There's no change. I'm continuing along that path. Well, where am I going? We're getting you ready for that. We're preparing you for where you're going. Let us explain where you're going. Go ahead.
We have entered the world of the spirit. Our next function is to grow in understanding and effectiveness.
Okay. So we've entered the world of the spirit. Where did it say that? The 5th step. Did it not? You may have had certain spiritual beliefs, but now you begin to have a spiritual experience. You're not waiting 3 years before you're going through the next day or that day. You're reading through this. Did 6 and 7. Remember, it says take this book down an hour after doing the steps. We translated that into 3 months after doing the steps. Let's look at, right? Let's look at now you're done still living on self. Good. Now let's see how you can improve you working on you. Right? That's not what this is about. That means hopefully we're good sponsors. I've gone through this and I've just read through this. Our next function. I'm talking to Buddy on the phone. I said, what? He says, well, your next turn off will be up here on 32nd Avenue. So that means I'm getting ready to go to 32nd Avenue to make my next instruction. Yes? Our next function.
Makes sense.
It's a shift. We've gone from self to fit ourselves to be a maximum service to God and the people around us, willing, good, and elects. Our next function, right, is what? Is to grow in understanding and effectiveness of what? The spiritual realm. This is right. We've entered the world of the spirit, the 4th dimension. We're in a different frequency. We've moved from the Neanderthal into the spiritual frequency. It's just like we've gone from AM to FM radio, right? And then later on we'll go to satellite. It's an increase in how we function. Our next function is we're going to hook up the satellite radio. Does that kind of make sense? Commercial free. That means a lot less of you involved. Commercial free. Because there's life, and then you keep on interrupting it with all the commercials. Wait, there's more. I don't have that insurance. Oh my God. No. So okay, so go ahead. This is cool. Our next function. So actually I'm not going to ruin it.
Oh.
I'm not going to ruin it. You're going to read what the next instruction is, right? You're going to read what is the purpose of page 84 to 85. Okay, so we were looking at 84, 85. There's a lot of parts of the book that a lot of people don't read what it says, right? And we get taught what it says, and we think that's what it says. Does that kind of make sense? So how many people, as they've been going through the study, kind of realize, holy smokes, what I've been taught and what the book says is two different things?
Totally.
right? And so why that is because we have so much treatment center influence, and we also have a lot of influence of self being the solution, right? And that's why we hear that a lot in meetings. I'm working on myself. I'm working on this. I'm working on that. How many people hear that, right? I got my old behaviors. I got this. Still a lot of concentration of self. Like Eddie and I, we went to a meeting today, and there was a guy I sponsored 25 years ago. He was in the meeting, and he's exactly the same as he was 25 years ago. Struggling with the same problems, can't get past self, is in conflict with everything and everybody, and he looks for advice for people to agree with what he's saying. Nobody like that here, right? Like you hear something from one person, you don't like what they say, go find somebody else till you find someone to agree with you. Anybody ever done that kind of recovery? Yeah. So I told him straight, right? And he didn't like it. And I said, well, go get arrested. I mean, don't let me stop you from getting in, right? So anyway, I won't get into that story, but it was funny. And I kind of reflected, what makes the difference between somebody coming into recovery who never gets past that stage and somebody who has the story of Alcoholics Anonymous? And it's this process, it's the implementing of it. And the more we understand what it's saying, the more freedom we'll be able to experience as the result of this course of action. So we hear stuff in the fellowship that really, when you challenge people on it, they get upset with you, or they become upset, right? Like you hear people say, oh, the 9-step promises. How many people hear that? Yep. Right? And so, but it's not the 9-step promises. It's just, it's something, or you hear people say, or the 10-step promises. You ever hear people say stuff like that? 10-step, 9 It is not 10-step or 9-step promises, but we like to say that, like, you know, I realize it's enticing and gives the carrot, and it's like, oh, these are... So, as we were looking at this last week, and if we kind of look at this idea here on 83, that we just finished reading. We just finished doing 6 and 7, and it says, now let's look at 8 and 9. Remember it said that? Let's look at it. Yep. Right? It's a preparation. That we're just not going out and taking people hostage and shanghaiing them. Right? We're preparing ourselves to clean off our side of the street and make right. Right? And a part of that is now our job is to what? To fit ourselves, to be of maximum service to God and the people around us. Right? Now we're active participants in this idea that we agreed to in 3. Right? This relationship, this partnership. Right? And we see, in order to consummate or to fulfill this idea, our part in this thing is that we have to go through this course of action in order to experience this psychic change or spiritual experience. We have to do it the way it was laid out. So they talk about, we went through 9, or as you go through 9, you see there's different scenarios in here. If you owe money, if you have criminal or different scenarios that they went through, that they give you bases of thought on how to approach it. Yes, no? Yep. Right? And so as you go through 9 with your sponsor, you'll see this area on finance, this area on relationships, this area on community stuff and criminal charges. Like, it kind of covers a wide area, right? And in your meditation, you'll use that as food for thought, as other people's experience, right? But then your best counsel is prayer, because all the way through there they talk about prayer, right? Like, you don't hear people hear so much about the 9-step prayers. There's actually prayers in the 9-step, and the basis of it is willingness, right? Willingness to overcome these things that were the kind of bindery of this thing. And it's the learning of humility and outgrowing fear and becoming honest, right? And a lot of that stuff is changing how we look at things through a spiritual lens now. So we have a totally different view of these things than we did before we started this. Yes? No? right? So we have but still there's struggles within ourselves in order to achieve that stuff. You see, self is very still a strong element, or still a stumbling block. What I mean by that is when you started thinking about your nines, how many people went right to the worst item and struggled with that? Yeah. You have a whole list, but you stick. My dog just closed the door. So you stick with the stumbling block, which are the ones I struggle with, instead of the ones that you can make now. But what you need to implement is 11. So as they went through this, they started saying on page 83, the spiritual life is not a theory, we have to live it. And then when they get through the overview of these amends, they say, if, right? If we're painstaking, we're going to read that again. So who's talking here? Them. Okay, go ahead.
I'm a recovered alcoholic. My name's Katie. If we are painstaking about this phase of our development, we will be amazed before we are halfway through. We are going to know a new peace, we're going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. We will not regret the past nor wish to shut the door on it. We will comprehend the word serenity, and we will know peace. No matter how far down the scale we have gone, we will see how our experience can benefit others. That feeling of uselessness and self-pity will disappear. We will lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in our fellows. Self-seeking will slip away. Our whole attitude and outlook upon life will change. Fear of people and economic insecurity will leave us. We will intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us.
So in that intuitiveness, the other place they talk about that we'll see is in step 11. That's what we're trying to develop here, that intuitiveness. Right? We're moving from that Neanderthal instinct-based living to a higher plane of thinking or living. Right? And they talk about, they actually talk about that in step 11, right? Our thought life will be in a much higher plane. Right? Okay, go ahead.
We will suddenly realize that God is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves.
So the basis of this experience is our relationship with a power greater than ourselves. That's the basis of this thing. And we will suddenly realize that somewhere along the line, what I'm experiencing is directly proportionate to my relationship with a power greater than me. We'll suddenly realize that means it's been happening. Right? Now, remember in the spiritual appendix in the back of the book, it talked about the people around us will become more aware of this change in us than we are, which is new. Because usually we're trying to convince everybody around us how much we've changed. Anybody?
Different this time.
Different. This time they're seeing it. And they're complimenting us on, wow, there's a real change in you. Before, we're trying to convince everybody else how much we changed, and they're saying, we're waiting. We hope to see what you see pretty soon, right? So there's a whole different element here. Go ahead.
Are these extravagant promises? We think not.
So they're talking based on somebody who's gone through this, and they're putting their experience in this basic text. Are they not?
Yes.
So this is a summary of their experience based on them going through this process. Have we gone through the process yet?
No.
No, we're just reading about it, right? Because we're looking at it. So the idea behind 6 and 7 is we keep reading, right? And this is not something that should take 2 or 3 months. The way it's designed is as soon as I finish 6 and 7, I should be reading through 8 and 9 with my sponsor, right? Reading through this and moving right into the next instruction. Yes, no, maybe?
Yeah.
So let's see what it says. Are these extravagant promises? Go ahead.
We think not. They are being fulfilled among us, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. They will always materialize if we work for them.
And the work they're talking about is on a spiritual plane. Right? Applying these principles, right? What we used to be like, what we're like now. We claim spiritual progress rather than spiritual perfection. The principles we have set down, right, are guides to progress. So in order to overcome these things in 9, I need to implement my spiritual way of living or access this power to overcome self, to do these amends, because I see I can't do them on my own resources. That's what caused the problem. I can't overcome self with self, right? So I need a recipe. And also, as we go through this, we'll see when I get jammed in, it's not about working harder on myself. It's going to find somebody else to work with to overcome these obstacles that I'm suffering from. Does that kind of make, is to create a deterrent, not a stumbling block, not a place where I stay stagnant, where I kind of put it on pause. I pray for willingness. I go find someone to work with, and then I revisit this idea on a different approach. That's where sponsorship comes in, and the people who've gone before us kind of help guide us through that. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah.
Right? So like when I talk to guys I sponsor, work with, when they talk with their guys, it's all about preparing them, right? And help them overcome or bypass their own thinking, because even their thinking, our thinking still is problematic at this stage of the game. Because remember, we said when we made a decision in 7, the reconfirmation was good and bad. How we really can't trust our thinking because we could still be self-deluded. Nobody in this group, right? That's why it says counsel with another human being, and hardly a self-appraisal is not sufficient enough. We need to hear what we're saying. When we voice this, we get to hear what we're saying, and sometimes when we voice it, we kind of, oh my God, that sounds stupid. Anybody?
Yeah.
But when you're just thinking about it, boy, it could sound good. We could create a good story until you say it out loud, right? Then it's like, oh my God. As you hear yourself saying it, you go, crap, I got a witness to this now. Crap. I just outed myself without realizing it. Does that kind of make sense? Anybody? How many people have been there?
Oh, yeah.
So we see that principle remains the same. So if we work for them. Now, I'm just going to take this for a second. This thought. What thought? This thought about the promises and their experience. Right? This, because have I experienced it yet?
Nope.
No, I'm preparing. So it says this thought. Go ahead.
This thought brings us to step 10, which suggests we continue to
Okay, so what does continue mean?
Keep moving.
Keep
going.
Continue to do what I was doing in 4 that got me the experience that I experienced in 5. What was the experience? I may have had certain spiritual beliefs, but now I begin to have a spiritual experience. I have the recipe on the removal of the blocks through getting access to this power. So we see when we did the 4th, it becomes a working part of the mind. Right? We learn how to master resentments. We know how to outgrow fear, and we have an idea of how we want our conduct in our relationships to be. And we've seen how these things harmed other people. So we have a good understanding what created all this based on self. That's why when they talked about, when they finished on 76 here, they talked about, now we go out to our fellows and repair the damage in the past. We attempt to sweep away the debris which has been accumulated out of our effort to live on self-will and run the show ourselves. So we see what created that. In order for me to have a different experience, I need to move, it makes sense to me, move from an instinct-based living to a spiritual-based living. Right? When I was sober, we used to hear people say, I'm a human being having a spiritual experience. Or some people say, I'm a spiritual being having a human experience. Whatever you want to look at it, right? But when I move away from that internal thing that makes me human, that makes me that kind of, then I become more of a Neanderthal, where I become self-concerned. And we should have a good idea what that looks like based on our 4. We don't need to explain it anymore. I see what I'm like on a non-spiritual basis. Everybody got an idea of that? What you're like on a non-spiritual basis? In order to be free of my story of how I am, I need to move in a new direction. So this thought, right? Wait, go ahead. Continue.
This thought brings... okay, sorry. Continue. Sorry, I'm just going to go back. This thought brings us to step 10, which suggests we continue to take personal inventory and continue to set right any new mistakes as we go along. We vigorously commenced this way of living as we cleaned up the past.
Underline that. As we clean up the past. So remember, this is a thought. This thought brings us a step to, they're expanding on their experience. So continue this as we go along, as we clean up the past. This should become a way of life, right? Is that what it's saying? Yes or no?
Yep.
Right? Okay, go ahead.
We have entered the world of the Spirit.
Which was the whole point of this course of action. Remember back on page where it says the main purpose of this book was enable us to find a power greater than ourselves because lack of power is our dilemma. We've tapped into that now. Now it's saying we've entered the world of the Spirit. So we see that there's two fellowships in Alcoholics Anonymous. There's the fellowship that we come into, and then there's the fellowship of the Spirit. In 164, it says, as we trudge the road of happy destiny, right? We've entered the world of the Spirit, right? So we get to see things a lot differently on a spiritual plane than we did on a Neanderthal plane. So now it's kind of like my sponsor said, looking for God's fingerprints all over the place. And how as I clean up the past, I get to see how God works in my life and the world around me. How these coincidences start happening more frequently, and how things just seem to jive, and how these things, these unexplainable things become more of a constant. Right? And it's kind of like freaky at first, but after a while you get to rely on it. Go ahead. Our next. What does that mean? Our next.
Next. Like right now.
That's they're giving us our first instruction, are they not?
Yeah.
Since reading, looking at 8 and 9, and they're saying now our next function, right?
Our next function is to grow in understanding and effectiveness.
Of what?
Spirit.
Of the spiritual world. Right? We've just entered the world of the Spirit. Our next function is grow in understanding and effectiveness of this. So that means I need to understand how it operates, right? I don't know how it operates. I'm just getting a small glimpse of this thing. So as I venture more into it, it'll become more like, wow, it's like moving to a new area. You're very unfamiliar where everything is and how everything works. And the people, as the more you stay there, the more frequent, the more understanding you have of the area and everything that works in the stores and the people. Does that kind of make sense? Like when you go on vacation to a new place, it's exciting. The more you go back there, the more you get familiar with everything, and the more effective you are, and the more you get to enjoy your trip. Does that kind of make sense? And that's kind of, if you look at the same principles with the spiritual realm, it's kind of like that. Okay, so see what it says. This
is not an overnight matter. It should continue for our lifetime. Continue to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. When these crop up, we ask God at once to remove them. We discuss them with someone immediately and make amends quickly if we have harmed anyone.
Where did we learn that recipe?
11.
Well, 4.
Oh.
Right? It talks about how we permit these things, how to master resentment, how to outgrow fear. So when these things crop up, we have a gauge to see what that feels like as it takes over our energy. Right? We know what it feels like now when I get in fear. Anybody? Or when I start getting in resentment, it changes my whole outlook and demeanor. Doesn't it?
Absolutely.
And I start poisoning myself with these things that I harbor. So how do I be free of that? I got to do the prayers and the 4-step process. So we see the foundation to my new way of life is actually 4 that prepares me for the rest of my life. Okay, go ahead.
Then we resolutely turn our thoughts to someone we can help. Love and tolerance of others is our code.
That's interesting. It sounds like that's the whole recipe there, isn't it? Because now I'm working with other people. But we're talking step 10 here. What they're doing is an overview. This is an overview of the whole thing. They're talking about, they're preparing us for the next phase of our development. They're giving us a synopsis or kind of an overview of this whole thing, what it looks like. It's like when you go to, anybody ever been to one of those travel agencies? When you look and say, wow, this place looks really cool. You go in and they give you a whole booklet of what you could expect when you go there. This is kind of it. This is what it looks like. This is what you could expect, and this is the purpose, right? Go ahead.
And we have ceased fighting anything or anyone, even alcohol. For by this time, sanity will have returned.
Okay, ready? How many people got their pen and paper? For by this time, sanity will have returned. What time? Here's where, right? In order to answer that, I'll have to look at the information leading into that, will I not? Mm-hmm. Because a lot of people give you the impression, by the time I'm reading step 10, sanity should have returned. It doesn't say that, does that?
No.
It says this should become a way of life. My next function is grow in understanding and effectiveness. And what leads into that is when I'm halfway through. Halfway through what? This process or my amends. I could expect somewhere along the line between the starting of my 9s and the practicing of the rest of this development, which would be 11 and 12, when incorporating it as a way of life, somewhere along the line, this change will happen. Well, what makes you say that? In the spiritual appendix in the back of the book, right? It talks about here
567.
567. So, among our rapidly growing, you want to read that?
Yep.
Last paragraph.
Last paragraph. Among our rapidly growing membership of thousands of alcoholics, such transformations, though frequent, are by no means the rule. Most of our experiences are what the psychologist William James calls the educational variety, because they develop slowly over a period of time. Quite often, friends of the newcomer are aware of the difference long before he is himself. He finally realizes he has undergone a profound alteration in his reaction to life.
And what does the promise say? We'll suddenly realize. Right? So they're saying this is happening over a period of time through the educational variety. Right? A period of time. So what's this period? What's this time frame? Right? Let's see what it says, what the time frame usually is.
Here we go. That such a change could hardly have been brought about by himself alone. What often takes place in a few months.
Ready? Underline that. What often takes place in a few months. So, when I engage in the thing the way it's designed, like when you looked at Bill's story and you look at Ebby's story, was happening within a couple month period. Ebby was 2 months sober, Bill's friend, when he showed up at Bill's place to carry this message to him. Bill was still in the hospital, but then when you read his story and the development of this thing, he was plagued for a year and a half with bringing this life about, right? Waves of self-pity and resentment. And the application was doing this to bring about a constant development, right? So it talks about, so I could expect what they're talking about, and through, it's one of those things you don't know it's happening. And the only way you know for sure it's happening is that you don't drink again. Because the sanity is something you can't see, feel, and touch. Remember? Because the problem gets removed. So when does they say the problem gets removed? Is as the result, right? Of these steps. These steps connect me to power. And as the result of this way of life, somewhere along the line, a profound change will happen. And that profound change usually happens for most of us is somewhere through our amends. Because we become less self-reliant and more God-reliant in order to do these things. And in order to do these things effectively, I haven't got the instructions yet. I have the foundation, but I haven't had the instructions to do it successfully. Right? So it's like I got the toolbox, I got the hammer, I got the saw, I got all these other things, but I just started to build a spiritual structure, but I haven't, it's not to a point where I could rest comfortably in it as a way of life, because I'm still plagued with me quite a bit. Anybody? How many people would say, yeah, you know what? Like I've experienced a bit of this, right? But there's still a lot of me in the way. Right? And I don't seem to go to this solution as frequently as maybe I hope to. And I spend too much time still trying to solve my own problems. And I seem to pay the price for that. That's why the ABCs talked about our adventures before and after made clear 3 pertinent ideas. The more you work on you, the more difficult it's going to get. Right? And there's a solution to you that God could and would if you were sought. And when we seek that, we seem to get relief from self. So it says being convinced. So even though you're sober, you still go through periods of being convinced. How many people cause themselves a lot of pain here? And where does it start? It starts in your outlook on life and your inability to have a different view and your inability to shake that. You're sticking to it, and people around you are saying, hey, you know there's a better way. No, there's not. You don't understand. I got to fix me. And then you got to stand back and let the car accident happen. And the first couple times you hit the wall, and then after they say, oh, I see what's coming here. So I'm going to practice some humility and pray for the willingness to be willing. That's what it's kind of saying there. So it means I see what's happening. I can't seem to shake it. And I'm defiant. I'm very defiant. God, give me the willingness to be willing, because, man, I got me stuck on me. And I know it, but I can't shake it. See what's happening here? So, for by this time sanity will have returned. The time frame of that is based on the promises.
Cool.
Right? When you're halfway through this inventory process or the amends process. You see how this thought, see how it follows? Anybody picking up what I'm putting down here? Because it says, now we're going to continue this thought, right? This thought brings us to that time. So they're expanding on the basis of that. So we're going to read something interesting. Huh?
You're in step 9. This is step 9 promises, but you're doing step 11 and 12 as you're doing it.
Well, don't ruin the surprise. Don't ruin the surprise. We're going into this for the first time, right? We're reading. So let's see what it says.
Okay. And we have ceased fighting anything or anyone, even alcohol. For by this time, sanity will have returned.
By what time? Halfway through this process, a couple months into it, if I'm diligent, right? Are these just we think not. They'll always materialize if we work for them. So the work was the more God-reliant I become and the less self-reliant I become, the less I suffer from me. Anybody? Yeah. So if you made a list of how many problems have God caused you? Well, we realize now none. Before the inventory, it was all our problems, right? Look what God's doing to me, right? Anybody?
Yeah.
And then after the inventory and you do your fifth, it's like, holy shit, look what I'm doing to me. Because we placed ourselves in a position, right? We made decisions based on who? Self.
Oh.
Right? So how many people are convinced of that? That I'm right? God isn't the creator of my misery. I am. It's like a parent. Anybody, like a good parent will see their kids miserable and try to offer them a solution. But if the kid don't want to do it, that's not the parent's fault anymore, is it?
No.
So we're kind of adolescents in a lot of ways, right? I'm taking my toys and I'm leaving the sandbox and that's it. Stamping our feet as we walk away. Okay, go ahead.
Yep. For by this time, sanity will have returned. We will seldom be interested in liquor. If tempted, we recoil from it as if from a hot flame.
And we see that in Bill's story. As you go along through this, as you struggle with self and amending, cleaning off your side of the street, you're going to be plagued with ways of self-pity and resentment. Anybody? Mm-hmm. And the thought's going to come, man, you know what? It'd be nice to have a toke, a drink, a couple pills, something. Maybe go watch some porn, go gambling. There's got to be something to create a relief for self. Right? Anybody? Come on, I can't be alone in that. Come on. Maybe a big piece of chocolate cake, big tub of ice cream. Turn off the phone so nobody interrupts you, so you can really get into your moaning and groaning. Anybody? Huh? Because when we're feeling like shit, we don't like to be taken out of it, do we? We really get into it. We really get into it, right? How many people got into that mode and looked at their phone beside them and it's ringing? God's sending some intervention, but you're not answering it.
Yeah.
Click, click, click. No, I'm going to enjoy where I'm at. Then it gets so painful. Then you go, okay, God. And then you realize like a week into it, right? And then you kind of go somewhere along the line as you get more sober. It's like, no, maybe a day, right? But it takes a while to get to that day process or that hour process. So, some of us take a real beating in self-administration. Nobody can beat us up better than us. Anybody?
No.
Everybody around us are amateurs.
Yeah.
Right? Okay.
We react sanely and normally, and we will find this has happened automatically. We will see that our new attitude towards liquor has been given us without any thought or effort on our part.
That's the miracle. That's the whole point in 2, what they talked about. I can't take care of this problem in 1. This process can, because I already agreed in step 1 that alcoholism is beyond my pay grade. You hear people say, I'm working on my alcohol. How? How do you work on your illness? It's like people say, I got this flu. I'm working on my cold. How? When I'm standing outside in my underwear? Like, what are you doing? How are you working on it? What you're looking for is a treatment or relief from it. I don't work on it because it's something above me. It's something that's invaded me, the bug, and I need to be free of that bug in order to be free of the symptoms of that sickness. Yes? No? And it's like alcoholism. I need to be free of it if I'm going to be free from it. And that was the whole idea of starting this thing. Because as long as I'm afflicted with alcoholism, I'm going to continue to drink. That's a promise. Right? Okay. We've not even sworn off. That's worth underlining that.
Mm-hmm. We will see that our new attitude towards liquor has been given us without any thought or effort on our part. It just comes. That is the miracle of it. We are not fighting it, neither are we avoiding temptation. We feel as though we have been placed in a position of neutrality, safe and protected. We have not even sworn off. Instead, the problem has been removed. It does not exist for us. We are neither cocky nor are we afraid. That is our experience. That is
okay,
how we
hold it.
react.
Hold it.
Yeah.
Whose experience is that? Theirs. They're talking about their experience and their overview of where they're at as the result of going through their nines in a new way of life they're living. They're passing that back to the reader or the person who's starting this. This is our experience. These things. Notice it doesn't say this should be your experience by now. Otherwise, they would have said that. They talk like that. Remember, they talk like that. Because if they expected you to be experiencing this now, they would have said it. Right? Mm-hmm. What makes you say that? Well, I'm glad you asked. Right? Page 71. So we went through their process based on their experience, and they showed us how they did a 4-step to have freedom. And the purpose of the 4-step was to get connected to source by the removal of the blocks. So we did what they did. This is what they said. We hope
you are convinced now that God can remove whatever self-will has blocked you off from him.
So what they're saying is you should have the same experience we had at this stage of the game. We hope you. Now, back over to 85, they're not saying you, are they? They're giving us an overview here. They're preparing us. They're giving us food for thought. They're giving us an itinerary. They're giving us something, an idea that we need to move toward. It's just like when you're going somewhere, all these things I could expect what I need to have. Does that kind of make sense? I need to have all these things in place, or I need to develop all these things if I'm going to be successful. This is what it needs to look like. When we went to Vietnam, right? We never went there, but the people who went before us said, you need to have this, and they told us about their experience. They told us about the medication they had to have before they went there to make their trip worthwhile. And they gave us a whole overview of that. And went, wow. And so what we did was, we prepared ourselves to have the same experience they did. Does that kind of make sense? We took this medication, we got prepared, and everything we could expect when we got there. And so at the end of the trip, we had the same experience they did, based on what they were telling us. That's what they're saying here. We're preparing you. Preparing for what? Our next function. Right? our next function. So this is what it kind of looks like, right? Our next function is growing, understanding, effectiveness. This is what it looks like. Continue.
That is our experience. That is how we react, so long as we keep in fit spiritual condition.
So have they give us the recipe in how to keep in fit spiritual condition yet?
No.
No. They give us the foundation, but not the development.
Right.
They gave us the emergency repair kit, but not the it's just like when you get I don't know how to say it, is like when we go to work, when I go to work on a movie set, that we have set etiquette, right? I don't know what that is, so they had to teach us and all that other stuff, right? They taught us self-etiquette and what we have to prepare and how we have to conduct ourselves on set. So we had to make sure a lot of these things were in place so it didn't conflict with anything around us. And the more we did that, the more undetected or the more we enjoyed life. Go ahead.
It is easy to let up on the spiritual program of action and rest on our laurels.
Yeah, right? Laurels mean
past achievement.
Yeah, I got to where I am. I'm feeling better. How many people have been there? No further development's necessary. They already know what you're thinking. Right? It's just like, anybody remember back when in their drinking days, you think, should I go to work today? You look in the bank account, no, I got money, I'm not going to work today. That's resting on your laurels. And then you look in the bank, I got no money, I got to go to work today. Anybody been there? That's resting on our laurels. I don't need to be that motivated today. I got food, I got this. So you rest on your achievement. And then you look one day and the bills are coming in, holy shit, I need to get a job. Anybody motivated through life like that? Fridge is empty. Nobody's loaning me money anymore. I better get busy, right? So your laurels has ceased to work for you and reality is now revisited. That's what they're saying here. I know you're feeling better and it's you and God and blah, 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 and you're fixing everybody around you and you're so full of you still that you're so impressed with you that now you're going to spend the rest of the time talking about it, right? Sorry, some people gave me that look. Move on before it turns into a lynch mob. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. We are headed for trouble if we do, for alcohol is a subtle foe. We are not cured of alcoholism, but what we really have is a daily reprieve, contingent on the maintenance of our spiritual condition.
A daily reprieve from what? From the problem that has been removed. What's been removed? The alcoholic mind. When? Somewhere along the process. I can't rest. I got to continue on. Remember, when they talked after 6 and 7, they reminded us of our commitment. Remember, it was agreed upon in the beginning they'd be willing to go to any lengths. They remind you of that twice in step 9. Twice. Because they know how we think. How do they know how we think? Because that's how they used to think. Right? How many people say, I don't really need to do 9s. Now I'm feeling better. Temporarily, you just got the shitter on the outhouse closed. You'll be back in there soon. Okay, go ahead.
Every day is a day when we must carry the vision of God's will into all our activities.
So that's the statement. I don't know how to do that yet. They haven't given me the instructions on how to do that. Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
How can I best serve thee? Thy will, not mine, be done. These are thoughts which must go with us constantly. We can exercise our willpower along this line all we wish. It is the proper use of the will.
So now you notice we got our will back. In 3, we turned it over. And now they're saying you need to be responsible for your own development in your own life now. You need to be responsible for this. And if you're going to be responsible, you need to seek my counsel. You need to be in partnership with me. Right? It's up to you to develop along these lines. Does that kind of make sense? In 3, we think, it's, nothing happens in God's world by mistake. Right? And then we do 4 and we see exactly nothing happened by mistake. You did most of it.
Yeah, you're the mistake.
Right? Right? Because nothing happens by mistake. Something made this happen. Right? And we see that most of it was because of us trying to live on by self means, that God didn't do this shit to us. It was the absence of God. Could you imagine going to somebody at this, you're doing your nines and say, nothing happens by mistake. I guess God had to teach you something and you just used me as a vehicle to do it, so you're welcome. Could you imagine somebody walking up to you and saying that? What would you say to them? Like, you just get out of the puzzle factory or what? You okay? Like, maybe you should stay away from me, right? So, like, sometimes we say things and we don't see the depth and weight of it. Like, you know, these sound bites and all these things that are flying around the fellowship. When you put it to the acid test, right? I mean, it has no depth and weight to it. It's just fluff. It's nothing sustainable in times of trouble. How many people have been in trouble here alone through their own thinking? And then you went, oh, acceptance is the answer to all my problems. You're not thinking, you think I'm in trouble here, right? You're broke, destitute. Acceptance is the answer. No, get a job is the answer to all my problems. Get busy. Willing to go to any lengths. Get busy. Stop resting on your laurels. Okay, go ahead.
Much has already been said about receiving strength, inspiration, and direction.
Okay, right? So we have that. Much has already been said about that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay, slow it down here a bit, okay?
From him who has all knowledge and power.
Circle this. This is the pivoting factor, the change, the momentum. So now we've been really exerting a lot of our will along these lines to make this happen. We've been fighting against ourselves, incorporating prayer. We've been diligent, like trudging here, right, with purpose. And it's been difficult, really, because you're swallowing, digest some big chunks of truth about yourself. You're trying to tap into this inner power, but your brain and your past and your future is still plagued with you. Anybody?
Yeah.
But they're saying here now we're going to do a shift. The momentum means it takes all my effort to see, hypothetically, to lift this wall. And then at a certain point it starts having a different momentum. Does that kind of make sense? The pivoting point. Right? Mm-hmm. It starts moving. I start to be propelled by something other than me. Right? Remember we're talked about here in 62. It talked about this idea here that we got to see in our 4. It talked about selfishness, self-centered, that we think is the root of our trouble. Driven by 100 forms of what?
Fear.
And self-delusion. So these were the driving factors in our life. Now we're being perpetuated or moved by something other than ourselves. So if what? 85.
Back to 85.
So here's the if factor.
Yeah.
To qualify whether we move on or not, or we have to go back.
If we have carefully followed directions.
Carefully, not open to interpretation.
Mm-hmm.
If we carefully followed whose directions? Their directions based on their example, based on their experience. Yes, no?
Totally.
You hear people say, well, it's open to interpretation. No, it's not. Their experience is not open to interpretation. Okay, so if
we have carefully followed directions, we have begun to sense the flow of his spirit into us. To some extent, we have become God conscious. So, ready? Here's something a lot of people miss. This is where they start talking collective. They're not talking to you anymore. Remember before they said if you? Now they're saying if we. It's a subtle change in the book. That means you should be having the same experience as us, and we're collectively, this is the story of Alcoholics Anonymous not only happening in our life, but it's also happening in your life now. Remember before that, they were saying you through the book? Mm-hmm.
Right? Now they're talking collectively. Like, okay, so if we have carefully followed directions, go ahead.
If we have carefully followed directions, we've begun to sense the flow of his spirit into us.
Okay, so stop there. So remember what I said is when we go back to the way this book is meant to be designed, right? So if we go back to where they talk about here, into action. So they talk about on page 75. So they talk about here, we may have had certain spiritual beliefs, but now we begin to have a spiritual experience. Right? But now we begun. Right? It's a continuous of that experience. So we go through, and so what the book is designed is we're reading through all this. We're reading through, we do 6 and 7, we read through 8, we read through 9, right? We read through their experience of having gone through it. This thought brings us to 10. We're reading through it. Now we're getting the next instruction. The next instruction from when? From 6 and 7. This is the next instruction that we need to do. What do we need to do? The next instruction, our next function, is to grow in understanding of effectiveness. So what does it say here? So, if we have carefully followed directions, we have begun. Same wording as the 5th step, right?
Crazy.
It's a continuation of that experience. Yes, how many people find that kind of interesting? Right? We're getting into the good stuff here yet. Okay, go ahead.
To some extent, we've become God conscious. We've begun to develop this vital sixth sense.
And then again, they talked about that, right? That the key way, this vital sixth sense, this different thing, the spiritual realm, this thing deep down within us, that thing that's always been there. Now we've tapped into it. We got access to it, and it's more present. We're able to hear it better because all that blockage isn't there anymore. And to each person, that it's personal. It's something deep within. It's just something that talks differently than from your brain. I don't know how to talk. How many people understand what I'm saying there? You get that thing deep down, and kind of that comfort that kind of says, "Hey, you know what? Relax," or "Don't do that." And then, yeah, I'm going to do that, right? And then he said, oh my God, I shouldn't have done that, right? It's that simple, right? Most good ideas are simple. And this was the keystone of the new and triumphant hearts which we passed to freedom. So, but, underline that, but we've just begun to develop this vital sixth sense. But,
big but, we must go further.
Why didn't it say, well, continue? We must go further. So this goes with resting on our laurels. What got us this far isn't the goal. This isn't the purpose. Step 10 isn't the mark.
We must go further.
So ready? How many people hear people talk about step 10 all the time? Personal women. If you look, it's half a paragraph.
Yeah.
It's half a paragraph. This thought is half a paragraph about you being focused on you. The rest of it is about me being focused on something greater than me. The rest of this introduction to where I need to go is about the foundation of my relationship with something greater than me if I'm going to survive. And if I'm going to keep this problem at bay, be free of it, be free of alcoholism, where I'm no longer dealing with alcoholism, I better make sure my spiritual condition's in check. I don't know how to do that yet because I'm still plagued with my thinking. Anybody? So now it says, but we must go further. You think we must. That's the next instruction. They gave us an overview. Now we must go further. What does it say? So this is the good part. This is where it's going to get, whoa.
Okay.
How many people are still listening?
I don't know how I've never seen the begin and the begun. You've showed me this how many times? This is the first time I've heard you say it.
Well, yeah, I know it's the first time you heard me say it. But I mean,
We've done this for 5 years.
How sober are you again?
Yeah.
And how sober am I? Right?
Yeah.
Like I've been doing these studies for 32 years. I mean, my books fall apart. I got a new book lasts me about 2 years. Why do I keep going? Because this is the Da Vinci's code to the spiritual realm.
So cool.
If you really understand and experience what's here, it's mind-boggling. Mind-boggling. And once you start experiencing, you go, holy shit, they should write a book about this. Oh, they did. Okay, go ahead. So that means we need more action. Every action step in this book has action before it, yes or no?
Yes.
Then why didn't they say that at step 10? It's not an action. It's a preparation step. It's preparing us. It's giving us an overview. What, did they forget to put it in there? Every action step has action in front of it. Why didn't they have that in 10? Why did they say continue? Why did they say this thought? Kind of weird, eh? Why don't people challenge that? Because we just assume that the people who taught us and the things we hear in meeting is correct. No, what does the book say? This is where people lose their shit. Oh, we do 10, 11, and 12 every day. Where does it say that? It doesn't. What it does say is what? But we must go further, and that means more action. Go ahead.
Step 11 suggests prayer and meditation. We shouldn't be shy on this matter of prayer. Better men than we are using it constantly. It works if we have the proper attitude and work at it.
Work at it. So what is it? These things will always materialize if we work for it. What's the work they're talking about? Is the spiritual development and meditation and connecting with Source. Mm-hmm. If we have the proper attitude and work toward it. Because our life is a byproduct of our relationship. How well my relationship is will reflect in how well my life is. My relationship with a power greater than me is directly proportionate to my relationship with everybody around me. Whoa. In life, right? It may sound kind of weird, but if I'm not connecting with Source very well, I kind of notice my relationships with people, places, and things aren't that great, are they? More self-based, right? Over concentration on the people around me to find happiness. Anybody? No. Put your hands down. How many people like getting projects here? Put your hands down.
Moving on. It would be easy to be vague about this matter. Yet, we believe we can make some definite and valuable suggestions. When we retire at night.
Hold it. When we retire at night. Why didn't they say upon awakening?
Because we're going to do it right now, tonight.
Because I just finished reading through all this stuff. And it's giving me the instructions on how to start doing it. When we retire at night. That means I've done my 6 and 7. I read through 8 and 9 with my sponsor. I've read through this. Now it's saying, now I'm going to show you how to do it when we retire at night. What does it say? It shows me how to do a spiritual inventory. We don't write it out. So this week, read that. Read how they did step 11. And see, this is the only working step that they give us. It's the only one in the book now. Because we're going to take everything the basis of everything they taught us, and we're going to develop it here in 11. So when you read through this, you're going to go, holy smokes, as we go through the day, pause, on awakening. When we go through how to access this power many times each day. So we'll see that this is the instructions to what we just read on 84, 85. This is how I make these things possible for me. I could experience this if I'm doing this. Right? And so I need to be doing 11 if I'm going to be doing 9s. If I'm not doing 11, then I'm not doing this process. Then I'm doing my 9s unsupervised. Right? And that's how I got into this trouble, unsupervised. And so step 9 is in my experience, and a lot of people I've talked to over the last 32 years, including my sponsor and the people, and including the book, is as I went through this and incorporating counsel with a power greater than myself and seeking power and doing this recipe by helping others, I got to experience the phenomena of the spiritual realm. How things just started happening beyond explanation. So it kind of goes like this. I'll give you a couple examples. when you do your 9. So I had to go back and visit my family that I hadn't seen in probably 16 years. And I had some warrants at the time, so I couldn't take a plane. I had to take a bus from Vancouver to Quebec. And it's about a 3-day travel, 3-day ride. Back there before cell phones. So when I sought counsel with people in the fellowship, my sponsor and the people in my group, they said, sit in the front of the bus, don't sit in the back of the bus. We don't need that explained, do we? Right? So I sat in the front of the bus. They said, back then it was a Walkman to give you an idea. So I brought, not a Walkman, actually cassettes. And I got spiritual tapes, as they suggest in step 11. So I got the tapes on the grapevine, and I listened to these tapes going through there. And they said every time you stopped at one of these bus depots to transfer buses to the next part, go in and ask over the PA if there's any friends of Bill W. there to touch base with. So I'd go in and say, hey, any friends? And I'd wait, nobody would show up. So the closer I got to this destination of making these amends to this family without getting, the more my anxiety started to increase. And I was praying, but I was alone in it. And the third step, on page 63, is a contract. And that's what I was told. So when they talk on this contract here, is the experience of those that went before me, they said that God will provide everything I need if I keep close to him and perform his work well. So being new, I used to say, hey, you, God, right? You said you'd look after me. I'm not feeling this. I'm on the last part of the bus trip. I'm alone. I got back then, no cell phones. I'm on this, and I'm freaking a bit. I said, you said you'd look after me. You're dropping the ball here. Like, you're not keeping your part of the bargain. That's how I used to talk to God. Maybe you guys don't, but I did. Where I come from, and I add a couple added adjectives to that, right? And I said, oh, yeah, you say you're all that in a bag of chips. You said you look after me. I'm not feeling it. You know what? I'm not feeling it. So I'm getting all squirmy in my seat. You know, newcomer shuffle. You ever watch a newcomer? The sign of a person thinking, can't stand still. This lady... This is the last part of I'm getting off the bus in a couple hours. I'm going to go see these people. This lady beside me, she goes, you okay? And I take off my headphones. I go, yeah, I just got to go visit these people. I haven't seen them in 16 years, and I got to take care of some stuff that I'm feeling kind of anxious about. She says, yeah, I done that. She says, I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous for the last 20 years. Oh. Boom. Look, I just got chills in my hair. Sitting beside me on the bus. I'm telling God he's dropping the ball. I can't see his grace sitting right beside me in the last part of the trip because I'm too focused on self. I had a bit of vulnerable. I told her, and she says, yeah, I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. That last part of the trip. She was there. So that's the things that carry me through now, is all that stuff through my 9, how I saw God show up in ways that are unbelievable, like just unexplainable. How do you explain that? Right? And so I got to see more and more and more that he is concerned with me, and there's a higher order to this thing if I'm willing to tap into this stuff. And the last story, I'll give you one of the most mind-blowing ones, because there's stuff in our inventory that we learn this process as we go along, and it'll stick with us. Right, so I ended up getting involved with somebody who wasn't in AA. We had a child together, and the woman had some problem. Whatever. Long story short, she took my daughter away from me, and I couldn't get access to her. Right, and so I was trying, and then so I said, God, I said, when you see fit for me to have her back in my life, I'm going to leave this to you. So every time those emotions of loneliness and sadness would go, I do that prayer. I said, God, you got this. You said you'd look after me. And when you're ready to have this unite, I'm going to trust you with that. And I said that for 2 years. 2 years I said that. One day in Vancouver, I don't know if you're familiar with Vancouver, but we have a place, it's a big shopping mall on Kingsway, right? Metro Town. I live in Burnaby, about 20 minutes away. Something said go to Metro. I never go to Metro. I don't like crowds. So I go to Metro Town. I'm just ready to pull into Metro Town. I'm feeling crazy. You know, like you ever get so hungry that you can't think straight? I started to have that happen. And then another part of me says, just go home and go to bed. Like just go home and start your day over again. So I turned down a street I've never been down. There's 4 lanes of highway. There's a kid in their diaper standing at a crosswalk. 4 lanes of road. I look, there's no adults, no nothing around. I stop the car and I tell the kid, hey, get away from the kid smiles at me. Right? Walks to the laneway, is probably 15 feet away, the laneway, in their diaper. They can't talk in diaper, they smile. I got on the phone to the police. The police is en route. I'm talking to the police, let them know what's happening. I'm staying far enough back, obviously, as this kid, and the kid's stopping, walking down the laneway, like 60, 70 feet down the laneway, like 15 houses down the laneway. Stops at a fence, looks back at me, hangs onto the fence, and smiles at me. I thought, this is weird, right? And so the police are en route. The kid walks up the back lane, back of the house, up to the 2nd floor, opens the door, and the people come out there in panic looking for this kid. The kid smiles at me again, and who comes walking out is my daughter's mother, her sister, and her grandmother. You tell me, how do you explain that? The cop shows up, says, do you know these people? I said, yeah. Says, last time I seen them was 2 years ago, and I've been praying to see my daughter again. Could you imagine me saying that? I was like, everybody was, and so that niece, is she actually my niece? Like, she's older now. She came and worked for me for a little while ago. But how God uses people, places, and things to instrument His will into our lives. And it was amazing. I have a relationship with my daughter now that's absolutely beyond. And I have story after story after story. What's the importance of that? The importance of that is when time's looking rough, I can remember that God was there then and He is there now. What I need is the proper attitude and the belief that the higher good will come out of this, even though I don't understand what that is, to see that my relationship with Him is right and go find somebody to work through and I'll get through this. And I mean, I got other people's witnessed the stuff that's happened in my life where they said, you must be kissing angels. I said, no, I got a good buddy in the right place. Right? So this is the experience that they're talking. You'll be amazed before you're halfway through. You'll suddenly realize the trusting and reliance. And where does that happen? Read 11 this week. So we're going to go over 11 next week, and we're going to apply it to some of 9s. I'm going to do a little more of my experience. And then you're, in turn, going to have the same experience. And one day you're going to talk about these remarkable things that you didn't realize were remarkable at the time, but when you look back on them, you go, holy, how do you explain that? You tell me the odds of that. You tell me the odds of that. I'm going to do one more story. So I got my daughter Tirza. I got daughter Serenity and I got a daughter Tirza. So I take her to Avril Lavigne concert. I had joint custody. I raised her. And so we're at Avril Lavigne concert. I spent all my money. I had box tickets. She had posters. She had those glow lights. She had the things. And I'm the proud dad. Yeah, you know what So it's the end of the night. I reach into my pocket because we lived on the North Shore then to take the ferry across. So I reached in my pocket. I realized I was $1 short, which we call a loony here. $1 short for the sea bus. Now I got credit cards. I got a bank card. I got all. Like, that wasn't the point. I realized in my hand I was $1 short. A part of me went like this. I went from D. I wonder if God looks after all my needs. And I laughed. I went like, it's $1. And I put the money back in my pocket and I went down in the stadium to meet my other friends. I told them we'll meet them. And so the stadium's quite long where all these people, thousands of people are walking back and forth. Me and my daughter are standing there. This lady's about 30 feet or 15 feet away from me at the phone booth. I see this person, she's walking with her hand in the air. She's walking like this through the crowd, and I'm wondering, what the hell's that lady's problem? I'm watching her. She's homed right in on me. I'm standing in the middle. She passes a couple hundred of people going back and forth. She's homed in on me. She goes, excuse me, sir. Do you have a loonie for this toonie? I'm trying to use the phone. It doesn't take toonies. Which she's saying, it doesn't take $2 bills. Do you have $1? And I'll give you this $2 bill for $1. My daughter used to go, yeah. Right. I give her a loonie. She gives me a toonie, and I stood there with my mouth open. I looked up and I said, I got you. Look after all my needs. I said, I hope I never question you again. My heart's getting full, right? And that's every area of my life. The job I have, go to page 13, right? Everybody there? And Bill's story. Yep. They talk about here, right at the bottom here.
My friend?
My friend.
Oh, my friend. My name is Katie. I'm a recovered alcoholic. My friend promised when these things were done, I would enter upon a new relationship with my Creator. That I would have the elements of a way of living which answered all my problems. Belief in the power of God, plus enough willingness, honesty, and humility to establish and maintain the new order of things were the essential requirements. Simple but not easy. A price had to be paid. It meant destruction of self-centeredness. I must turn in all things to the Father of light who presides over us all. These were revolutionary and drastic proposals, but the moment I fully accepted them, the effect was electric. There was a sense of victory, followed by such a peace and serenity as I had ever known. There was utter confidence. I felt lifted up, as though the great clean wind of a mountaintop blew through and through. God comes to most men gradually, but his impact on me was sudden and profound.
Okay, awesome. So when we're looking over, and then we'll go over and see where he's kind of talking about this stuff and developing it. When we went through Bill's story, this become a working part of the mind, right? And you hear a lot of people, kind of a summary here, is when they talk about step 10, they talk about a half a paragraph in step 10. To continue to take personal inventory, and that's the whole focus. You ever hear that? That's the whole focus of step 10. It says to do that is to continue something that you initially already started. And what was that, the 4 and 5, right? The recipe in 4 to see how self is causing you problems. You need to do the 4 in order to see that. Yes, no, right? And so what happens here, the rest of step 10 from 84... right to 85 is all about this relationship I need to formulate and depend on. The rest is all about this relationship. And somewhere along the line, it says, by this time, sanity will have returned. By what time? By the time I formulated this relationship, I'm working with others, and I'm cleaning up my past. Somewhere along this timeline, and we see in the spiritual appendix, it talks about what usually takes place in a few months. So somewhere along this timeline, if we're painstaking about this phase of our development, what phase? The men's and my relationship with something greater than me, right? So they talk about over here, and we looked at it, that, I finished, because if it was okay, I'm just going to say it, what the hell, why stop mucking around now, right? So we hear a lot of people say, oh, this is what step 10 is. It says right there to continue to take personal inventory. Then in step 8 and 9, step 8 and 9 is really not about amends, is it? Right? It's about clearing up the wreckage of our past. And what's the purpose of 8 and 9? Well, on page 77, it says our real purpose is to fit ourselves to be of maximum service to God and the people around us. How many people do you hear talk about that in steps 8 and 9?
No, not very often.
They all talk about still the struggle of self and the difficulties of making these amends and not being at peace with these things and realizing that the whole purpose of this thing is so other people can start having healing and being a demonstration of this power that's happening in your life that maybe possibly that you may bring hope to somebody else's life. Right? A demonstration of I don't know how many times I went and made amends as I was doing my 11 and 12, working with other people. I was doing my amends, and these people, maybe sometimes not right then and there, but sometimes they'll go, I know a guy that was beyond anything I could ever imagine. You should see the way he's living now. Maybe I'll give him a call. Or maybe I'll give, you know what I mean, to come and help. Or, hey, can you come and help my son out? Or can you help me with my mom, my dad? Can you kind of give me some insight to what's going on with them? And what made that possible was a demonstration of these things, where I went and kind of not just said sorry, I went and made an amend. I asked their permission if I could meet with them, and I told them what I was about to do and why I had to do it, and they already knew what I was like. And the purpose of the process was so I could recover from this illness that was killing me. And in a real general way, and they talk about not leading with your chin, right? Starting off as evangelical AA you know what I mean, let over enthusiasm, right? Sometimes that thing of humility is really cool. So to fit ourselves, to be a maximum service to God and the people around us. So this whole theme is about my relationship with something greater than me, isn't it?
Yep.
Page 45 says I need to formulate this power if I'm going to recover it, isn't it? Because before that it says it's not about behavior modification. Because if that was enough, it was about me fixing me, then a lot of us would have recovered long ago. But that's what we hear is the basis of a lot of people's share, is how self is fixing self and how I have these problems. Well, if these problems are directly proportionate to my spiritual condition, which makes sense now, right? Because I couldn't change me based on me. And how many people try to change themselves here? How many people seen themselves doing stuff that they didn't want to do, but they couldn't stop themselves from doing it? Mm-hmm. Anybody a prey to misery and depression here? Anybody, saying things or doing things to people that you don't want to do, but you can't stop yourself from doing it? Mm-hmm. And even when you catch yourself, it's too late now. It's the toboggan ride, right?
Brakes turn back.
Yeah, the window's already broken. Might as well throw a chair through it, right? It's kind of like that kind of thing. We can't stop ourselves. So we see that they don't call that the isms. They call that the human perplexities or the human condition that we apply these spiritual principles to. Somewhere along the line, people started saying, oh, my alcoholism, right? I have these isms. Well, no, you have humanism, not alcoholism, right? The alcohol, we understand what is associated with that is the two symptoms, and we become sick, and I need to recover from that, right? So this process enables me to do that. Why do you say that? Well, all the other 12-step fellowships, right? They have the human condition. How did they treat the human condition? Was with those other things. How did we treat it? Was with alcohol, right? And then we were kind of held hostage by this thing, and it was determining our lives. So we didn't have the power to create a shift within inside of us sufficient enough where we're no longer afflicted with that. So when we kind of look at this thing on 85, it says here, and this is the idea, right? So they talk about here, we will see that our new...
top of 85. We will see that our new attitude towards liquor has been given us without any thought or effort on our part. It just comes. That is the miracle of it. We are not fighting it, neither are we avoiding temptation. We feel as though we have been placed in a position of neutrality, safe and protected. We have not even sworn off. Instead, the problem has been removed.
What, by the time I'm reading step 10 or at step 10, the problem's removed? No, they already told us that the thought leading into this was based on the promises. This thought, what thought? Of this new experience, having gone through or persevered with the rest of this thing, you'll be amazed before you're halfway through, that you'll suddenly realize that God is doing for you. So if you're realizing this thing, that must mean you're in a relationship with or a partnership with something greater than you, creating a different experience. Because it didn't say, you'll be amazed halfway through based on you. Did it? But you hear a lot of people say that. Look how great I'm doing, right? I've done most of my amends. I'm fantastic. I'm blah, blah. And most of their credit is based on themselves, not their reliance on something greater than themselves. And maybe I'm the only one hearing this. Anybody else hear that? Or anybody used to talk like that? And then you get drunk again and you can't figure out why. Look at all my behavior modifications. I was doing so good. How many people heard that? You were doing so good. And then you had to go celebrate with a drink. You were doing so good, right? So you're an example of you. So here, go ahead. Instead, we have not even sworn off. Instead, the problem has been removed. Where was that idea that it was possible for this thing to take place? What step was that?
3.
Well, in the decision, but it was the overlay of 2.
Yeah.
That this psychic change or spiritual experience would be possible if I was to do a course of action. Remember when Bill was sitting at the kitchen table with Evie? Mm-hmm. Right? I saw my build with what my friend was having. It was only a matter of being willing to do what he did to get what he got, basically. Right? Yeah. That's what he said. Nothing more was required to make my beginning. And so as he went through that course of action, my friend promised I'd have the elements of way living that answered all my problems. So we see that all his experience is a byproduct of his relationship. That those things didn't happen first, the relationship happened first. And we understand that, right? And why do we need to understand that? Go ahead.
The problem has been removed. It does not exist for us. We are neither cocky nor are we afraid. That is our experience. That is how we react so long as we keep in fit spiritual condition.
So is alcoholism still present or the human condition still present?
Human condition.
You're still present. That's why you need to do these things. You need to apply these spiritual principles to you so alcoholism doesn't return. And why would it return? Of the rebuilding or of the blocks coming back in. What blocks are they talking about? The resentment, the fears, and conduct. Right? And being directed by self again, being counseled with self. Right? We see that these blocks shut us off, and then the insanity of alcohol returns. The illness returns. Right? Why do they say it returns? Well, here, what does it say? It is easy.
It is easy to let up on the spiritual program of action and rest on our laurels. We are headed for trouble if we do. For alcohol is a subtle foe. We are not cured of alcoholism. What we really have is a daily reprieve, contingent on the maintenance of our spiritual condition.
So, right? A daily reprieve means what? Am I still suffering from that if I have a daily reprieve from it?
No.
The problem's removed. What removes the problem is my relationship with something greater than me. What keeps it at bay? What gives me a state of grace on a daily basis? Is my understanding of this thing or my experience in this thing?
Your experience.
Because if it was based on our human condition, none of us would be getting sober, would it? Would we?
Probably not me.
Well, anybody still suffer from self here?
Yep.
Anybody get to a place where you can't even stand you?
Yep.
Never mind being around anybody else, right? And what would save the day, we realize, is go find somebody else to work with. Newcomers always find enough tolerance for us because they can't get past themselves.
Nobody else is talking to them.
Yeah, I mean, it's so crazy. You're the only person you're making sense to now is a newcomer. They're just on every word, right? People around you is like, holy shit. Even my wife sometimes goes, so have you talked to Alex lately? I remember the first time she said that, I said, what are you trying to suggest? Right. So now she says it. And then what I do is I go back and I do a spot check-in with God. What's going on here, right? And then I look over my inventory process to see what instincts are getting out of whack or what's filtrated within my system that I'm not looking at. That's kind of came through the side door and starting to take a hostile takeover, right? And I've been ignoring this thing, right? And so now I get back to the recipe to get relief from it, right? And we're going to get into that in a second. Go ahead.
Every day is a day when we must carry the vision of God's will into all our activities. How can I best serve thee? Thy will, not mine, be done. These are thoughts which must go with us constantly.
Interesting, right? But they never showed us really the recipe. So they're giving us an overlay of this whole thing. Like, to really be able to accomplish this intent, really? Really? Right? Let's be honest. How long has it taken to be able to pause in step 11 and ask for direction? How many thoughts do you have before you say, okay, maybe I'll pray? How many days can you go before you maybe I'll ask God for some help here? How many people go it alone until you figure there's a problem, then you'll invite God into it? So you have one of those relationship with God is you only call him on convenience, not a relationship. Hey God, having a problem. You busy? I'm good from here. I got it. Hear people say that God only does for us what we can't do for ourselves. Who determines that? Right? So that's saying, well, then don't really bother God. It's like the kids with the parent. Don't bother your dad. He's working. Don't bother. So you really don't develop a relationship. It's just one of those things. If you have to ask. Otherwise, you just stay out of the way. Is that really a relationship? But, a lot of us call that a relationship, but it's like, anyways, I won't get into it. Go ahead.
We can exercise our willpower along this line all we wish. It is the proper use of the will.
So do we got our will back now?
Yep.
So it's the proper use of the will. Have they showed me how to properly use my will? They've talked about it, but they haven't shown me how to do it. They've shown me how to do an inventory process, how to master resentment, outgrow fear, and bring my conduct into alignment. They showed me how to move from a Neanderthal or human a condition into a spiritual one, how to move from my own counsel to something greater than me through meditation, the application of the exercise in 4. Haven't they? And then in 5. So I have all these tools now. What am I going to do with them all? Well, let's see what it says. Because I need to formulate this overlay of what they're talking about here. So they just gave me a blueprint for a house. Right? And they talk about that, and we agnostics, they talk about this spiritual structure. So if it's a spiritual structure, where do I reside? On the outside of it or on the inside of it?
Inside.
On the inside of it. Most of us reside on the outside of it, meaning I think I'm separate from this relationship. When I pray like I'm making a long-distance phone call. Right? Come on. Anybody? Right? So it's kind of like, well, that's not in the same house. Like I can call up to my wife right now, we're in the same house. Right? We reside in the same place. We have a relationship within this structure. Right? So go ahead.
Much has already been said about receiving strength, inspiration, and direction from Him who has all knowledge and power. If we have carefully followed directions...
So we see that everything we've done so far brings us up to this point. If we've carefully followed directions... Now, like on our job, we have a tool package, right? And if you're starting on the job, you have to have all these things in order to start working. If you don't have these things, then you don't have the tools sufficient enough for you to do the job that you're going to be taught. Does that kind of make sense? So what's this tool package? So we have this tool package now, right? And then we have a job we're going to do is to fit ourselves to be of maximum service to God and the people around us, to play the role He assigns. Where did we hear that? We heard that in the 4th step. Well, why did they talk about that in the 4th step, to play the role He assigns? Because we made a commitment to this relationship. There's no pause. There's no stopping. It means I got my tool package. I'm going to work. I got a call. I'm going to work. Right? I get to the job, and everybody at the job knows what I need to do. What do I need to do? I need to show up and be present to take direction as we go along. And at the end of it, day by day, day in and day out, without the full knowledge of why they're doing and how they're doing it, at the end of it, they'll have everything they need to make a movie. Even though I don't know, it doesn't make sense. They do 3 scenes over here, 4 scenes over here, they build a stage over here, but they're doing the last part first and the middle part second, and it's all crazy. And it makes no sense to me, but I'm following direction. And at the end, somebody puts it all together, and then it creates a motion picture, or it creates our lives and the participation of other people's lives, though it doesn't make sense overall. But if I participate as I go along, how will it start to look? So if we've carefully followed directions, okay, now what?
If we have carefully followed directions, we have begun to sense the flow of His Spirit into us. To some extent, we have become God-conscious.
And that's what the purpose of the 5th. We may have had certain spiritual beliefs, but now we begin to have a spiritual experience. Why? Because all the stuff's out of the way. Right? Go ahead.
We have begun to develop this vital 6th sense, but we must go further. And that means more action.
So you notice how they started, step 10 was this thought. And how they're finishing, this thought is, we must go further now. We give you the overlay. Our next function is grow an understanding and effectiveness of what? Of this relationship. Right? The world of the spirit and our internal relationship or connection to that. 2 different elements. They're the world and our connection to it. What connection to what? The fellowship of the spirit that they talk about 164, my connection to see. So my understanding is to grow an understanding and effectiveness of something that's already in place. I'm not developing that. I'm developing my understanding to it. It's already developed. It's everything that I could possibly need and want, right? All knowledge and all power. So what's the weak item in that relationship? Me. So when we say, well, if God's willing, well, why wouldn't he be? Right? What's the weak item? Right? So what's the limitation to my experience of with this thing? If all these people are experiencing stuff that's absolutely mind-blowing, what's my limitation to the experience available to me?
You.
Me. Isn't that interesting? So I limit my experience to this because when people talk about the idea of this thing, a lot of us start thinking, anybody? I can't see how this is possible. This doesn't make sense to me. I can't move past the human understanding to experience what's available here. The stepping out into the fourth dimension, into the realm of the spirit, right? You hear people say stuff like that. Like when you stand at the edge of the door, you'll learn one or two things. How to fly, or there will be steps there. You ever hear that thing? So what we need to do, we're moving from our attachment to logic and instinct into the development. So what does it say? The next page it says, when we retire at night. So that means at what night? What night are they talking about? Tonight. So does that mean when I finish my 4 and 5? Right? 6 and 7? Does it mean after 7 or after I finish step 9?
It means that night that you did it all.
That night, because I read through it. Because it says, let's look at 8 and 9. Right? The promises, right, are the result of, right, doing this process, right? This thought, what thought? Of you being amazed when you're halfway through. And then in 10 it says, somewhere along the line, by this time sanity will have returned. So it's a continuation. There's no breakup in that thought. So 8, 9, 10 are all combined. Because it gives you the idea in 8, what our real purpose is to fit ourselves to be of maximum service to God and the people around us. But nobody talks about that. It just told you what the whole purpose of. Well, what was the purpose of the book? Is they get connected. So this whole thing is about the relationship. So it makes sense. The faster I get into the 11, the better. But in order to really utilize 11, I have to have done 4. And I have to have done 3. Because if I haven't done 4, then I can't really do 11, can I? Because when I meditate at night and review my day, who's going to be talking to me the most? Self still. I won't have that connection. But if I kind of pause and I've done my 4, my 5, right, and I'm willing and I pause, it's just like when you finished your 5, it asks you to go home and sit for an hour and see if we have omitted anything. And did anybody omit anything, leave something out? Mm-hmm. And self tells you, doesn't it? Like your spirit tells you, doesn't it? You don't have to go searching. Your spirit goes, hey, excuse me. I think you forgot something. What makes you say that? Because something still stinks over here. The paperwork ain't done. So sorry, I can't do it. So what happens is your conscience tells you, your spirit is still connected. That's how we were able to do the 4. All those resentments, all those fears, all those attachments to what? To spirit, right? That kind of blocked us off, that made us live more instinct-based than spiritual-based. So when we start shaking that shit off, it's like, wow, I like the way I feel. And Bill talked about that. And you need to experience it. Anybody experiencing that? It's not bad. It didn't say all the time. It says, have you experienced it sufficient enough? Yeah, you know what? I've experienced enough of it where it talks my language where I want more. Right? Anybody understand the language of more here?
Yep.
And when you experience it, I want more. How do I get more? That's what step 11 is about. So as we went through this on awakening, and we're going to do some in thinking about our day, we may face indecision. We've gone through this. Here we ask God. Where? When I'm having a moment of indecision. When self shows up, I'm feeling some anxiety. I'm being triggered. Right? I'm having a stress disorder. No, you have a thinking disorder. You don't have a stress disorder, you have a thinking disorder. So if you calm your thinking, guess what? You'll stop dry heaving. You won't be fear-based. What makes you say that? Because that was me. I used to dry heave all over the place. My thinking was crippling me. And I was able to get freedom from just pausing and asking for help, God for help, and doing the recipe. So then we talk about over here, what used to be a hunch, page 87. What used to be a hunch, or the occasional inspiration, gradually what? Becomes a working, what, Katie?
A working part of the mind.
How does it become a working part of the mind? Is through the application of these principles now.
Do it, yeah.
Right? These principles. What principles? We're going to get into that, how it becomes a working part of the mind. But all of us, because what happens is we still seek our own counsel. So I need to be disciplined to stop and do the recipe, to pause and seek counsel other than myself. That's why sponsorship's good. That's why it's really good to the people I work with. We remind each other sometimes, right? Like, hey, how's self doing? Fantastic. I'm going it alone. And it usually starts off with this. You know how when self takes over, it's subtle. Those assholes. Fuck, can't believe those people out there. Nobody knows how to drive. Nobody appreciates me. Look at everything I do. Ungrateful sons of a bitches, right? Anybody? And you're smiling, and it's just you and you. Me. Anybody? Come on, anybody? Come on. And then your mind starts looking for a solution for that. Whatever it is. Anybody have a list of things that make you feel better, that make you feel worse? And then here's this kind of, you know what? I seen this yesterday. And when I did my 11, I see if I pursue this, it's going to cause me shame, guilt, and remorse. Even though I get something, you know what? I'm going to ask for help here. What corrective measures should I take? So if I see what's causing me problems today, right? I can see what corrective measures spiritually I need to do tomorrow. Does that kind of make sense? But if I don't have that recipe, then it's still self-directed by self. That's why in 10 it says, when these things crop up, as I'm cleaning up my past, these resentments, these fears, these things from my past, as they start to show up in my present again, as I'm doing my 9s, I need to pause here, right? But if I'm doing 11, well, I need to be doing the management after the accident. We want to take care of the problem before the accident, don't we? Mm-hmm. So step 10 we see as a digression back into self. Self's taken over, and I'm not in 11 anymore. You hear people say, I'm doing 10, 11, and 12 every day. Well, if you're doing 11, you wouldn't need to do 10. Right? I remember there was silence here, and then I remember I was talking to the screen. Everything went silent. I used to do the way it used to be in the meetings too. You say that, right? So what makes you say that? Go ahead.
Okay. After working part of the mind, being still inexperienced and having just made conscious contact with God, it is not probable that we are going to be inspired at all times. We may pay for this presumption with all sorts of absurd actions and ideas. Nevertheless, we find that our thinking will, as time passes, be more and more on the plane of inspiration. We come to rely upon it.
So now, if I'm doing 11 at night, and in the morning, and through the day, what are the odds I'm going to develop this pretty fast?
Faster than if you weren't doing it.
Yeah, and if I'm just doing step 10, and when I have a problem bringing God into it, how painful is my life going to get? How long am I going to be able to stay sober with that approach? Because who is still in charge of me? Self. And that's the problem. There's no way of getting rid of self without his aid. So one of the things is, you ever see two vessels, vases, when you fill one up full of water and the other one's empty, and they kind of coincide like this? Well, when I was filled with self and the spirit wasn't there, I had all kinds of problems. And as I started to develop spiritually, self became less and the other vase became more full. And then when it got around this, the leveling mark, I started feeling more relief, right? And as it started to shift, I started feeling less presence of the problems with self and my connection to the world. And more, I started concentrating on my connection or keeping this vase full, right? It's like keeping the bank account full. If I keep the bank account full, then it pays all my automatic withdrawals. Does that kind of make sense? All my bills get taken, everything gets taken care of. So I don't have to think about my problems anymore. I just got to think about my bank account. Well, I don't have to think about my bank account. All I have to think about is being employed. And if I'm doing what my employer says, what's the odds I'm going to stay employed? If I'm of service, pretty good. So all I need to do is worry about my relationship with my employer and do the job he asked me to do. He gives me a check, that goes in the bank, and that takes care of everything. So really, what I need to do is just focus on my relationship with my employer, right? So now, everybody, does that kind of make sense? Pretty simple, right? So now, if I was to focus my employer who hires my employer is all knowledge and all power. My employer, I have a new employer, right? He is the principal, we're his agents. He's the father, we're his children. Most good ideas are simple. I have a new employer now that provides all that I need if we keep close to him and perform his work well. Where was that contract? That contract was on page 63. So all I need to do, common sense would become uncommon sense, is concentrate on my relationship with Source, with God, and everything else will be taken care of. It kind of doesn't make sense, does it? That's why you need to experience it. When you start experiencing it, really weird shit starts happening.
Yeah.
And then it does, and then you come to rely on it. Rely on what? Hey, do you have a toonie for a loony? Hey, when I'm sitting on the bus, I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. Hey, you know what? Hey, the person in Hawaii, God abandoned me. Hi, I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. Like, it goes on and on and on. And it started with your prayer somewhere on the need of help, and somebody showed up. One of God's agents got the phone call, and they showed up in your life to direct you to where you are. How amazing is that? All you did was place the call. The operator transferred your call to one of his agents, one of his workers, and has you sitting here today. That's pretty wild, right? So the internet's been around a lot longer than it's been around. Right? this thing, right? When Bill...
Wi-Fi, but you'll have a better connection.
That's right. Wi-Fi, right? Is like when Bill sat in that treatment center the second time, it wasn't long till Ebby showed up, right? Pretty well. And when Dr. Bob, it wasn't long before Bill phoned Bob. Bob didn't phone Bill. Yeah. Right? So let's keep reading here. This is where it's going to get good. How many people still paying attention? 2. That's good. That's good. How many people thinking? A little bit, eh? Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Back 87, middle of the page. We usually conclude the period of meditation with the prayer that we be shown all through the day what our next step is to be.
So, when they say all through the day, well, you have to go through the day for that to happen. Does that kind of make sense? Like, I can't pray this all through. That means all through the day when I'm agitated or having a problem, that means I'm going to stop, meditate on what the right... calm myself down where I'm not reactive and instinct-based. And override a lot of my emotions, thinking, and reactions, where they're internal explosions instead of involving other people, which is progress, which we're not good at it, right? Like when we get to a place where we get to that place and we're not telling the other people to go pound sand out loud, that's progress, isn't it? And then you
trying to tell them.
and then you get to a place where not even your face starts to change.
Not there yet.
Okay, go ahead.
A little bit more Botox and I might be there.
Just do the work. Okay, go on.
We usually, all through the day, what our next step is to be. That we be given whatever we need to take care of such problems.
Okay, so honestly, if we were to have this as a working part of the mind and you were actually doing that, would your life look the way it looks? Or would it look better?
Look pretty good.
I'm 32 years old, and I can honestly say it takes discipline to do this. Sometimes it's really easy when I'm grateful and life's fantastic and I got rainbows shooting out of my eyes and life's great and just, everything you touch turns to gold. Anybody been there? It's just like, oh, God's so good. And then a bit of shit happens and there's a bit of more thinking on self and self-loathing and self. And I need to interrupt that by going, okay, God, what will you have me do? Because what I want to do is a lot different than what he would have me do. Right? Is like where I come from and where I'm at is no short. This is the game changer. What makes you say that? Well, my neighbor is a horrible drunk. Oh, I don't know why I'm whispering. My neighbor is. You ever notice when you whisper on the phone, the other person starts whispering too? It's like, yeah, everybody like, what? Oh, no.
I leaned in, I got closer.
So my neighbor's a terrible drunk, like terrible. Like pissing on my property. I put up a fence, then he started pissing on my fence and it seeped through. Like, it's bad. We're having dinner upstairs. He's pissed. And I try to be calm, I walk over. And where I come from, I didn't walk over calm. I walk over with a stick and teach everybody one time what I was talking about. There would be no confusion about pissing on my property or on my fence. There'd be no confusion about where we stood on rough idea without getting into it, right? Communication wasn't my strong suit. Anyways, there was always
nonverbal communication.
Nonverbal, Neanderthal. I talked like Braille, right? So anyways, so I put up a fence. I tried to be nice. I left them a big book. I left them a directory. I tried not to get into it too much and whatever. So the neighbor on the other side called the city because their property got so bad that they're trying to sell. It got so bad. They think we did it. So I come home from work and he's screaming, you're a fucking goof. Your wife's a fucking tramp and all this. And I'm thinking, oh my God, what's going on over there? I didn't know he was talking to me. I'm just getting home from work, right? And he's coming over, so I go grab my dog. I go over and I'm standing there talking to him. And I said, what's your problem, man? And then he's like really being abused. So in my brain, I'm letting my dog go and it's all gone, right? I tell him, I don't know what your problem is. You need some help. I said, you're belligerent drunk and it's not funny anymore, right? I said, you need some serious help and I would appreciate if you wouldn't conduct yourself in this manner or talk to my wife this way. Right? Because I won't tolerate it. That's a little different than what's happening inside. In order to get to that place, I had to pause as I was going over there. Because as I was going over there with my dog, there was 3 of them. As I was going over there initially, it was a lot different than the outcome was. Does that am I making kind of sense? So on the way over there, something said, ask God for some strength here, man. And I calmed down, I stopped at the property, I made my peace, and I went back home again. Pretty cool. That is really cool, right? Because that usually is not the case. Usually I'm in a cop car and somebody's in the hospital and there's a court date pending. And then when I talk to them again, there's no court date pending because there's no witnesses. Right? You need to have a witness for a court case to be efficient, right? Without getting into anything, right? Yes, I've had a lot of charges, but no convictions. We're not getting into that. Go ahead. This is the game changer.
Okay, we asked especially for freedom of self-will and are careful to make no requests for ourselves only. We may ask for ourselves, however, if others will be helped. We are careful never to pray for our own selfish ends. Many of us have wasted a lot of time doing that, and it doesn't work. You can easily see why.
Yeah, and that's a nice way of saying it. Anybody here negotiate with God? To barter? How many people barter with God? Well, you know what? I'll do this if you do this. Anybody? So, if you take care of this person, and this person, I'll be a little more grateful. I'll pray more. Anybody kind of have that anybody praying about God taking care of people? Thank God he didn't take care of all the people I asked him to take care of. That would be a really lonely life. That one's gone. And then when I did my step 8, it was, whoops, I totally misread that. Can you bring them back? Right? Too late. Thank God God doesn't listen to everything I have to say. Anybody here? Some of the best prayers are the ones that weren't answered.
Totally.
When I look back, I thought, oh my God, at the time, it was hard negotiation. And then when I got more sober and time went on, it was just like, thank God. Especially when you see those situations, as time goes on without getting into it, you just go, thank God I sidestepped that. Thank God you had my best interest at heart. Thank God I didn't get that job or that relationship or that situation. Thank you. Thank you I didn't go left when I went right, because if I would have went right, there was a catastrophe waiting for me there. Thank you for that getting caught in traffic. Because if I didn't get caught in traffic, maybe I was the one in that accident up ahead, right? Who knows, right? Okay, go ahead.
If circumstances warrant, we ask our wives or friends to join us in morning meditation. If we belong to a religious denomination which requires a definite morning devotion, we attend that also. If not members of religious bodies, we sometimes select and memorize a few set prayers which emphasize the principles we have been discussing.
Memorize. Why do we need to memorize them?
So you can do it all day.
And mostly is when we need it the most is at night when we're alone. Because how many people show up when they're alone? The lights are off. Everybody's supposed to be quiet time, and it's like, we have a meeting planned. And then you just start, and it's just the anxiety starts and tossing and turning, and the more you think, you start getting revved up, and nothing's happening. Anybody? And you're participating in that. You're throwing the fuel on it. So what they're saying here, unless I have something to refocus on, that will be my primary focus. I can't stop not thinking about it. So I keep thinking about it till I pass out from exhaustion. Anybody? Then you wake up and start it again. So now, in early sobriety, I was still plagued with, like Bill, with a lot of thinking, a lot of problems, a lot of anxiety, because I was looking at penitentiary time. I had a lot of warrant, I had problems. I had some serious problems. I was still vomiting green bile. I was having problems with my vision. I still have it in one eye. I had a lot of trauma. And it's just like problems. Like I couldn't keep food down. I was having a really hard time when I got sober, and these things, my pancreas and all my liver and all that other stuff. So then when I went to sleep at night, I started thinking of Christmas past. Even though I did a fifth on it, I was still, some of those things didn't sit well with me. And I don't know if anybody's like that. And because I haven't made amends or made right yet, and some of those things I was thinking, how am I going to meet these people, my creditors, these people? How am I going to make amends to these people after what I'd done? And the severity of my life was just like, oh, and it wouldn't shut up. And I went to my sponsor and I said, what am I going to do? He says, do you know the Lord's Prayer? I said, yeah, I know it. And I had to re-memorize it. I said, yeah. He says, I've never, ever been able to do it 3 times in a row without falling asleep. I thought that was weird. So I went that night. I'm starting to think I did the prayer 6 times. I went back. I said I did it 6 times. It didn't work. He says, no. He says, did you start thinking as you started praying? I said, yeah. He said, then you didn't do the prayer, did you? I had to go back and start the prayer over again and concentrate on the prayer. I've never been able to do it 3 times in a row in the last 32 years. I've never been able to do it 3 times in a row without falling asleep. It's the weirdest thing. It's the weirdest thing. And learning there's all forms of it, but along these prayers and these ideas, it's kind of like that. Or it's just like there's other things, meditating, like playing frisbee with your dog along the beach. If you're able to be there, you will fall asleep. But it's just one of those things where I kind of going along the beach, and then I'll step on something sharp, and it kind of bring, it's just, as long as I'm doing the prayer, it seems to work. And I don't know why that is, or if I'm having anxiety, when I'm going to go do my amends, and I just do the serenity prayer and think about the wording of the serenity prayer. And just breathe. My sponsor used to say, breathe. He says, if you're thinking, you're not breathing. And this is weird. He used to say, just think about your breath. And I think about my breath, and I breathe in and I forget what I was thinking about. Because I break the instinct attachment. Does that kind of make sense? Mm-hmm. Right? And I'm changing the chemistry within inside of myself, right? So what happens is I'm participating in the changing of the mechanisms within my own mind, my own experience, through applying these prayers and this stuff. And so as time goes on, it becomes easier and easier and easier, because it comes the working part of the mind to be able to go, next time you find yourself thinking, just do a check-in with your level of breathing and your anxiety. You say, isn't this interesting? Because then I created an anxiety-based life or experience based on what? Based on my thinking and my attachment to my thinking that they talked about in the 4-step, that now we permit these things. The reason you're thinking on the level that you want to think is because you want to think it. You're participating in it. Because now you have an alternative way, right? But in the beginning, a lot of us are more pain-oriented than we are solution-oriented. So at first it's out of discomfort, and then after a while this just feels good to be connected on a more constant basis. And what does it say here? Go ahead.
There are many helpful books also. Suggestions about these may be obtained from one's priest, minister, or rabbi. Be quick to see where religious people are right. Make use of what they offer.
Yeah, you should be able to sit anywhere and be okay with anybody, what they're doing. Because with general principles of connection and source, be quick to see where they're right. So it changes the basis of the conversation. So it's kind of like when you're sitting around a table from all denominations and all global kind of economics or influence, it doesn't matter on what kind of relationships they are. You talk about the basis of what makes a relationship. Right? So what does that mean? So whether you're Baptist, Nazarene, Islamic, right? You're feminist, you're gay, you're non-binary or whatever, and everybody started talking about their idea of a relationship, well, there's going to be problems at that table, right? Mm-hmm. Because the Islamic's not going to the idea of that, and now a fight starts. But if you talk about what are the bases of a relationship, everybody could have input on that. Yes, no? Mm-hmm. So if we had our mind more geared toward that, how would our lives start looking? So we could find a place to meet in the middle instead of, right, the extreme. Okay, go ahead.
As we go through the day, we pause when agitated or doubtful.
How many times do we do that? Come on, let's be honest.
When it gets painful.
When it gets painful, right? But imagine if you were to do that on a more constant basis, just the discipline of pausing and redirecting and non-attachment and kind of reformulate the energy that's happening from your attachment to your instincts that you learned on your 4-step, right? Because this fear, what precedes resentment is fear. What's fear based on? Is it based to a threat, one of my basic instincts, somebody not doing what I feel they're going to do, or something I think they're going to do. So a lot of us ruin the relationships we're in because of something that happened in the past that we won't let go of. We think it's going to happen again. So we're creating the very thing that we don't want to happen. Anybody? How many people been in relationships where you're arguing about shit that's not even happening? Or yesterday's crippling your todays? Right? So it's not today that's ruining your relationship. It is the stockpiling of all that shit. But if I was doing this, every day would be anew. Because this is within a 24-hour period. You notice it didn't say for over the last week or last month or last year. It says today. Today. In our house, we have a rule. If something happened more than 3 months ago, I don't talk about it no more. I don't relive it. I don't talk about it no more, unless it's funny. But if it's something to rehab, there's no point.
Wait. If you think it's funny or everyone else thinks it's funny?
Just keep reading, okay? I'm going to pause here for a second. Thank you for your help in my development. Okay, go ahead.
Hey, that's why I'm here.
Okay.
We pause when agitated or doubtful and ask for the right thought or action. We constantly remind ourselves we are no longer running the show.
And this coincides with what they said on page 85. Every day is a day we must carry the vision of God's activity in all our affairs. Well, they're showing us how to do that now. This is the recipe for what they were talking about on page 84 and 85. Right? Because 84, 85 talked about this relationship I need to formulate and depend on if I'm going to survive this thing. If I'm going to be free from alcoholism, if I'm going to have this thing removed, then it's based on my relationship with something greater than me. This is the recipe on how to do that. Isn't that interesting? How to do what? This thing that's on the other side, this blueprint that I need to formulate in my life. Well, here's how you do it. Wow, isn't that interesting? Okay, go on. We're just getting to the good part. Go ahead.
Humbly saying to ourselves many times each day that I will be done. We are then in much less danger of excitement, fear, anger, worry, self-pity, or foolish decisions.
See, this is the precursor, right? To not experiencing all that shit. So if I'm doing this, then I don't need to be doing 10, do I?
You're doing it.
I'm doing it. This is everything. If I'm doing 11, I'm doing all of it. Right? If I'm doing 10, I'm not doing it. Mm-hmm. It may kind of be weird because otherwise they would have said, oh, just keep doing. They don't say do step 10 every day. I don't do 10, 11, and 12 every day. I do step 11. 11 has all of it involved. Mm-hmm. Has me to be able to monitor and to do the application of the things I learned where? In step 4. Step 5. The things I've seen in 6 and 7. That I'm carrying here in 11 on a daily basis. Oh, this thing from the past came up today. Geez, I didn't handle that well. On a review tonight, or even right then. But most of us don't do it right then. I hear a lot of people, I do 10 promptly. Yeah, you're full of shit. We do it a couple days later, right? We do it after I've been seething about it for a couple days. I'm not there yet. And then I say, hey, by the way, I'm sorry. Sometimes we do it real fast, but most of the time we nurse it a bit. Anybody? Maybe I'm the only one in this group. Okay. Some of you are like, yeah. Okay. So, go ahead.
We become much more efficient. We do not tire so easily, for we are not burning up energy foolishly as we did when we were trying to arrange life to suit ourselves.
Pretty cool, eh? So that's kind of a summary of what they were talking about on 87, what they were talking about on 86, and what they talked about at the bottom of 85. Right? If we carefully follow directions, we have this sense. Now we're going to develop this thing. Develop what our next purpose is to grow in understanding and effectiveness. We just enter the world of the spirit. Our next function is to grow in understanding and effectiveness of this thing. Right? I'm not developing it. It's already developed. I need to grow in understanding of it. Right? The condition, I can't. It's too deep. I'm going to leave that alone. I'll let you guys figure that out later. When I figured out certain things, I kind of went, holy shit. It's like I don't go develop power. Power's already there. What I need to do is learn how to utilize it. Right? And when there's not enough power, like my place is 110, if I don't have enough, I could get it upgraded to 220. Right? But that's just a small part of the source that I get to utilize within my own means. So I could upgrade. And that's kind of like what we do here. We come at an entry level, then we upgrade, right? And the more we upgrade, the more I realize, right, like yeah, this is pretty wild here that I get to utilize the stuff within my plane. Then I walk out and I see it's connected to a big conductor, transformer. And I think, wow, you ever hear those transformers explode? Mm-hmm. Bam! It sounds like a cannon going off. And then, or if you ever seen one of it, the power that comes out, you're kind of amazed, and you realize that's just a small sampling of what that's connected to. Then you go to the other power grid, and you see this huge power grid. You ever see those things? They have a fence around it, and then there's a humming from all the power. It's like, and it's sufficient enough to do the whole neighborhood or the whole area, that whole area, Cloverdale or whatever. It's pretty wild. And then you realize, you think, wow, that's unbelievable. You're getting your mind wrapped around, there's an even bigger understanding or bigger source available. Then you go to the place when we went to outside of Vegas. There was the dam. I forget the name, right? Hoover Dam, right? So I was reading lips there. Thanks, Rob. So, where I come from, you got to learn how to read lips. Believe me, you're always looking through glass. Anyhow, that's another story. So I can't believe I said that. Okay, so then you go to the Hoover Dam, and you're kind of blown away. What you thought was power was really just the tip of the iceberg. Not even that. It was like, wow, holy smokes. And you're sitting there in awe. And then you realize, you look at the source that created it as the water, and then you look at what created that, and then you look at the universe, and then you have a look at how big we're in, and then if you were like me, you'd have a moment of panic to realize how insignificant and small we are compared to this whole thing. But I have access to it, which is pretty wild, and I'm accounted for, which is really wild. I'm accounted for and connected to this whole thing. That is mind-blowing. It's kind of freaky when you think about it, but it's kind of, when you get there, it's kind of wild. Okay, I don't know why I went there. Okay, go ahead.
Cool. It works, it really does. We alcoholics are undisciplined, so we let God discipline us in the simple way we have just outlined.
See, if you read that without guidance, the first time I read that is oh, I'm going to get punished. Right? That has to do with a lot of that step 6 stuff, right? So we alcoholics are undisciplined, so we let God discipline us in a simple way we just outlined. So that means if I'm not doing what was just outlined, God is going to discipline. My spouse said, no, it doesn't say that. What it says is, we alcoholics are undisciplined. Mentally. We're undisciplined, right? So we let God discipline us in a simple way we just outlined. Well, how is God going to discipline? Because of the connection that I formulate on the previous pages. That just outline, not have been outlining. You got to look at the wording. Just outline. What did they just outline is step 11. When we retire at night, upon awakening, all through this is the only 24-hour clock that we're given in this whole process. The whole process is to get us there. Once we're there, it's not about the steps anymore. I don't do 10, 11, and 12 every day. I don't. I do 11. I pray for direction of His, for knowledge of His will and the power to carry that out. A lot of stuff that it just seems to fall in my lap that I ended up doing. And the basis of my sobriety is between step 11 and this next first page here that we're going to finish this off with. And it talks about, finish what it's saying here, there. But that's not all. Wait, there's more.
Wait, that's not all. There's action and more action. Faith without works is dead. The next chapter is entirely devoted to step 12.
There's action and more action. Practicing these principles and carrying this message. 2 groups of ideas. Interesting how they say that, right? There's action and more action.
Very cool.
Okay, practical experience.
Practical experience shows that nothing will so much ensure immunity from drinking as intensive work with other alcoholics.
So this goes with what they talked about on page, I think, 77, right? Our real purpose is to fit ourselves to be of maximum service to God and the people around us. This is a part of the contract that we read on page 63 that they experienced by if we performed His work well. This is a part of it. The disciplines of 11 and the carrying of this message. And that's it. And if I'm able to utilize that on a daily basis, your life will look beyond anything you could ever imagine. What will start happening is the miracle and the story of Alcoholics Anonymous will start happening in your life, and you'll be a part of the collective. You'll say, me too. I've experienced these things exactly as they promised. Right? All intuitively. Go ahead.
It works when other activities fail. This is our 12th suggestion. Carry this message to other alcoholics. You can help when no one else can. You can secure their confidence when others fail. Remember, they are very ill. Life will take on new meaning. To watch to watch people recover, to see them help others, to watch loneliness vanish, to see a fellowship grow up about you, to have a host of friends. This is an experience you must not miss. We know you will not want to miss it. Frequent contact with newcomers and with each other is the bright spot of our lives.
So the rest of the book is dedicated on the development of these principles and carrying this message. So what it's saying is, I have everything I need up to page 88. Step 12 is the result of the experience that I had. Now I'm carrying this message. Having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps. So what that's saying, if I just had up to page 88 and the spiritual appendix in the back of the book, I would have the same recipe that they had. What they added to the rest of the book was their 4 years of development in this that they put in practical application, saying this is what they did or this is the approach. And they start taking you through how to 12-step people, and then you go, holy shit, this is exactly the same way I was 12-step. And as we go through this, they start talking about to the wives, which is applicable to anybody who has somebody suffering from alcoholism in their life, right? And then they go on to the family afterwards. What their experience is in applying these principles or these ideas and incorporating step 11 and being of service, and the difficulties they had with practicing these principles in all their affairs, the stumbling blocks they had within their thinking and the application of these things, which is really cool, right? And then you keep going through this thing. Then it talks about, if I'm not mistaken, to the employers, which is suitable for anybody to read. Is pretty wild. And then you could educate people that are around you. They talk about that in PI, right? And then they talk about a vision for you. Who?
That's my
you.
chapter.
Huh?
The chapter about me.
Yeah, vision for you. And then they close it off by saying here that our book is meant to be suggested only. We realize we only know little. They're talking about 12-step work there. A lot of people say, we only know little about alcohol. No, we need everything we need to know to formulate a relationship with a power greater than, which is all knowledge and power. That's a pretty strong statement, right? Pretty good experience. If you're given a recipe how to connect to source, that's pretty wild. That's able to transform and revolutionize your life and attitude and outlook, right? To enable you to experience a cellular change, a spiritual experience. What other formula do you need? Right? So, and then as we go through here, they said, so then they reiterate here, ask him in your morning meditation. So we see that step 12 is a part of step 11. Every morning when you get up, what's my job to be today? How can I be of service? How can I be? And the rest of the book's dedicated on how I can do that. So the most important step that this whole thing is about, anybody have an idea what this whole thing is about? Is step 11. And if you're doing step 11, the way it's outlined and the way it's suggested, you won't need to do another thing in your entire life, except enjoy your sobriety and enhance it. You'll have an experience beyond anything you could ever imagine. May God be with you and the force and live long and prosperous. I really enjoyed this stuff. And yeah, the great fact for us, we'll finish with that. The great fact is what?
What page?
Let's go with our book. Our book is meant to be suggestive. We'll finish with that off. Go ahead.
Okay. 164. Our book is meant to be suggestive only. We realize we know only a little. God will constantly disclose more to you and to us. Ask him in your morning meditation what you can do each day for the man who is still sick. The answers will come if your house is in order. But obviously you cannot transmit something you haven't got. See to it that your relationship with him is right, and great events will come to pass for you and countless others.
What step is that? See to it your relationship is right.
Step 11.
11. And what gets that is the previous steps to get your relationship right. Mm-hmm. Right? Keep going.
This is the great fact for us. Abandon yourself to God as you understand God. Admit your faults to him and to your fellows. Clear away the wreckage of your past. Give freely of what you find and join us. we shall be with you in the fellowship of the Spirit, and you will surely meet some of us as you trudge the road of happy destiny. May God bless you and keep you until then.
Now, I did this to be funny, and this is the paragraph we're going to read. Still, you may say. Right at the top. We did it backwards. Still, you may say.
Oh, changing it up. Still, you may say, but I will not have the benefit of contact with you who write this book. We cannot be sure. God will determine that. So you must remember that your real reliance is always upon Him. He will show you how to create the fellowship you crave.
There you go. Is that wild?
So cool.
The only person robbing you from this experience now is you. You have the recipe to an experience, a story, and a life beyond anything you could ever imagine. It's only willingness to duplicate what we have experienced. Come walk with us in the sunlight of the Spirit. May God be with you. Love you guys, and live long and prosperous. Thank you, Katie. Thanks Rob. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah.
Recording stopped.